Chapter 1444. Elder Nangong was still in a daze from the fall. He raised his head in bewilderment and realized that a thin layer of frost had formed on the ground. It looked like it was caused by the ice ball that the kid had tossed earlier. I didn't really want to kill anyone. Elder Tian sighed softly and shook his head. He stared pitifully at Elder Nangong, who was sitting on the ground. His tone of voice was filled with murderous intent as he said, "However, you actually dared to steal my treasure. You're courting death. I'll fulfill your wish." After speaking, Elder Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. With a leap, he once again flew into the air. The surging yuan qi within his body surged out violently and condensed into a huge yuan qi vortex in his right fist. He then fiercely smashed it towards Elder Nangong. Elder Nangong, who was sitting on the ground, saw this and the corners of his mouth twitched. Alarm bells rang in his heart and he immediately rolled to his feet. He quickly chanted an incantation and combined the black and white jade artifacts into one with a pa sound. As Elder Nangong poured his yuan qi into it without holding back, the black and white jade artifact gradually emitted a gentle but not dazzling golden light. After the light spread out, it slowly covered Elder Nangong's body and formed a cloak-like golden battle robe. Seeing that Xiao Chen's fist was about to land on his body, Elder Nangong gritted his teeth and raised all the yuan qi in his body to the limit. He then stretched out his hand and suddenly pulled on the battle robe on his body. The golden battle robe once again turned into a stream of light and condensed in Elder Nangong's palm. It quickly changed shape and became a shining golden blade. Elder Nangong did not say anything and immediately swung the sharp blade towards Elder Heaven Ancestor's fist. The people of Burning Sky faction were stunned. This magic weapon was too heaven-defying, wasn't it? One black and one white could turn into a shield and a spear. When combined, it could turn into a defensive battle robe. But with just a casual tug, it turned into a dagger. No wonder this Elder Nangong was so arrogant. It turned out that he was full of confidence with a divine weapon in his hand. There was a series of bangs in the air as Elder Heaven Ancestor's yuan qi fist and Elder Nangong's golden blade intertwined. Like two poisonous snakes biting each other, they fiercely fought back and forth, each wanting to devour the other. However, after more than a dozen exchanges, the strength of both sides seemed to be in a state of equal strength, unable to determine the victor. At this moment, Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi were extremely anxious. They really wanted to help Xiao Qin, but in this kind of high-level confrontation with their meager skills, there was no way they could interfere at all. Even if they forcefully interfered, they would be beaten and defeated at any moment. Coupled with the fact that there were still 5 profound Cloud Sect disciples standing in a row in front of them, not even the slightest gap could be seen. Therefore, Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi could only stand where they were, staring unblinkingly at the situation in front of them with worry written all over their faces. In contrast, the profound Cloud Sect disciples looked extremely calm, as if they were not worried at all that Elder Nangong would be defeated. In their view, with the current situation, one of them would be the first to fall. That exalted immortal Xiao had already been injured, so he definitely would not be able to fight for long. Even if both sides were to be injured, they would still be able to rush forward in time to save Elder Nangong and kill that so-called exalted immortal Xiao. Boom. After the two had fought for a long time, a violent explosion of yuan qi suddenly rang out. The two who had been fighting each other first trembled slightly before explosively retreating through the air. Elder Nangong's figure flashed and returned behind the 5 disciples. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The golden battle robe on his body had also disappeared. Elder Heaven Ancestor had retreated to Hongzhu's side with a very gloomy expression. His originally rosy skin had also become deathly white. He supported himself with both hands on his knees and panted heavily. "Yeah. Big Sister's husband is still the most powerful. That old thing has been beaten until he spat out blood, but you're completely fine." Hongzhu waved her little fist and cheered. She glared at Elder Nangong in a provocative manner, then happily grabbed Xiao Chen's arm and asked curiously, "Oh, that's right, hubby, why did your voice suddenly change just now? Why did it sound like an old man to me?" "Little demon, and hurry up and take Hongzhu away from here." Ugh. Xiao Chen's voice had already returned to its original state, but he did not immediately answer Hongzhu's question. Instead, he gave a command to the flying sword with great difficulty. After giving the command intermittently, Xiao Chen finally could not help but let out a muffled groan. He clutched his chest with a pained expression and knelt to the ground. "Ah! Cough cough cough." Elder Nangong's hoarse laughter came from not far away. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and threw a few pieces into the air. They were black and white jade artifacts that had already been cracked into several pieces and had lost their luster. "Boy, you didn't expect this, did you?" Elder Nangong's expression was a mixture of pride and ferocity. Coupled with the remaining blood on his face, he looked very terrifying. "You are indeed very strong. If it wasn't for the protection of this old man's magic weapon, perhaps I would have really died in your hands today. Xiao Chang. Could it be that you—" Finally realizing the seriousness of the problem, Hongzhu's original joyful expression instantly disappeared and turned into a look of panic. He could not help but cry out involuntarily. At this time, a little demon had already driven the flying sword to Hongzhu's side, intending to follow Xiao Chen's orders to take her away. However, before she could act, she was pushed away by Hongzhu. After pushing the flying sword away, Hongzhu squatted down and reached out to help Xiao Chen up. However, when he looked up, he found that the light in Xiao Chen's eyes had begun to gradually dissipate. Xiao Chen struggled to maintain the last bit of his consciousness. He shook his head powerlessly, feeling extremely bitter in his heart. After the last clash between Elder Heaven Ancestor and Elder Nangong, Xiao Chen, who had been staying in the Sea of Consciousness, noticed that the aura of Elder Heaven Ancestor's primordial spirit had suddenly weakened to the point of imminent danger. Xiao Chen made a prompt decision and immediately took over his own body. However, as soon as he took over, he found that his injuries were much more serious than Elder Nangong's. At this time, several important meridians in his body had been broken and he could not circulate his primordial spirit. He was basically relying on the last breath of his primordial spirit to hold on. That was why Xiao Chen asked an little demon to take Hongzhu away immediately. Otherwise, with Elder Nangong's unrelenting attitude, if he targeted Hongzhu, the consequences would be unimaginable. "So your name is Xiao Chang. That's good too. There are too many nameless people who have died in my hands. You are still an opponent worth remembering." A gloomy voice sounded in the living room. Elder Nangong stared at Xiao Chen, who was kneeling on the ground, and said coldly, "But that's all. Next year today will be the anniversary of your death." Chapter 1445. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Nangong gave a meaningful glance to the disciples surrounding him. Immediately, two of them executed their movement skills and rushed in front of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu. Circulating their mental cultivation techniques, they displayed the cultivation of a perfect nascent soul cultivator. Then they simultaneously took out their own magic tools and fiercely slashed at the two. "Husband, wake up." Hongzhu repeatedly shook Xiao Chen, but the latter did not react at all. It was obvious that he had already lost consciousness. Hongzhu watched as the two magic tools, which were flashing with a strange light, approached menacingly while Xiao Chen remained motionless in his arms. His mind raced at lightning speed and he no longer cared about his panic and despair. His eyes shifted and he caught a glimpse of the flying sword beside him. He recalled the order Xiao Chen had given him earlier, and immediately reached out to grab the hilt of the flying sword. "Go. Get us out of here." Hongzhu tightly hugged Xiao Chen with his other hand and sternly shouted at the flying sword. Boom boom. The two disciples' magic tools simultaneously smashed into the ground, creating two deep crescent-shaped pits. Immediately, crushed stones flew in all directions and dust rose into the air, filling the parlor and causing everyone present to cough repeatedly. They could not even see what was in front of them, and could only continuously wave their hands in vain in an attempt to disperse the dust in front of them. When the dust finally dispersed, everyone focused their eyes and saw that Xiao Chen and Hongzhu had long since disappeared from the parlor. The two disciples looked at each other in shock and hastily chased after them outside the house. As far as the eye could see, the two of them could only see a black dot rapidly disappearing into the distance in the sky. It seemed that they would not be able to catch up to it in the span of a few breaths. The two disciples looked at each other in dismay. Helpless, they could only return to the house with dejected expressions and apologize to Elder Nangong. Such a powerful magic tool was only used to escape in the end. What a reckless waste of God's gift. Elder Nangong did not blame his subordinates. He merely rolled his eyes and snappily ridiculed them. At this moment, the entire guest hall was terrifyingly quiet. The people of the Burning Sky faction could only watch helplessly as the consecrator they had painstakingly invited was beaten to the point of escaping. They couldn't help but feel anxious and fearful, not knowing how that Elder Nangong would deal with them. Cough cough. Elder Nangong held his chest and coughed a few times. Then he straightened his body and turned around to look at Duan Suqing and Gong Shaoxi. He said arrogantly, "I believe you have already seen it." That arrogant Xiao Chong who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, has already been killed by me. Now, quickly prepare a few well-equipped rooms for us to have a good rest. Go to hell. Why should I prepare a room for you? Do you think you're... Gong Xiaoxi was so angry that he glared at Duan Suqing and cursed. But before he could finish, Duan Suqing pulled him aside. Elder Nangong, please don't lower yourself to the same level as this kid. He's young and hasn't seen much, so he's not very sensible. Duan Suqing apologized again and again. Elder Nangong's expression was a little cold. He glared at Gong Xiaoxi but didn't flare up. He only snorted unhappily. Duan Suqing pulled back Gong Xiaoxi, who was about to go berserk again. He first gave him a look, then asked tentatively, "Allow me to ask a question. I wonder if Elder Nangong wants to stay here to enjoy the scenery of the Burning Sky faction, or if you're not feeling well and need to recuperate for a while. This way I can arrange more suitable services for you." Actually, Duan Suqing also had his own plans. Everyone had seen the scene of Xiao Chang and Elder Nangong fighting. Although Xiao Chang was indeed defeated and left, Elder Nangong also vomited blood and was injured. Now that he suddenly requested to rest in the Burning Sky faction, people couldn't help but be a little suspicious. If Elder Nangong was really seriously injured and wanted to use the Burning Sky faction to recuperate, then Duan Suqing would have to think it over. Should he bear the humiliation and obediently bear the burden, or should he fly into a rage and directly exterminate these people? I didn't know that Sect Master Duan had such a breadth of mind. You don't even have the slightest bit of reaction when your consecrator was exterminated. Admirable, admirable. Elder Nangong glanced at Duan Suqing, sneered and said unhurriedly, "I'm not recuperating nor am I going on a holiday. This old man considered that you would need time to take inventory of those heavenly treasures, so I purposely stayed for a few days to let you carefully examine them before handing them over to us." The corner of Duan Suqing's mouth twitched. He knew that his little thoughts had probably been seen through by Elder Nangong. He could only smile awkwardly, call over a disciple beside him and give a few instructions. Then he forced a smile and said to Elder Nangong, "The rooms have already been prepared for you. Please follow this disciple and stay there. If you have any other instructions, you can also directly tell this disciple." "And that's more like it." Elder Nangong nodded in satisfaction. Then he brought a few disciples and swaggered out the door with the Burning Sky faction people. When passing by Gong Xiaoxi, Elder Nangong gave him a rather disdainful look and sneered, "Little guy, learn more from your sect master. Remember, your Burning Sky faction is just an insignificant small sect. Don't think that just because you have the protection of a trash profound ascending stage expert, you can do whatever you want. Our profound cloud sect only needs to move a finger to destroy you at any time." After saying that, Elder Nangong laughed to the sky, and left the reception hall amidst the compliments of the 5 disciples. "You." Gritting his teeth, Gong Xiaoxi stared at the departing Elder Nangong and his subordinates. He was so angry that he clenched his fists. His face was ashen and he wanted to rush up and perish together with them. "Xiaoxi, I know you can't take this lying down." Duan Suqing patted Gong Xiaoxi's shoulder and let out a long sigh. Staring at the backs of those people, he said bitterly, "Actually, I also hate that arrogant Elder Nangong. But you also know that the Profound Cloud sect is after all an outstanding sect in the cultivation world. With the current situation of our Burning Sky faction, we don't even have the strength to fight to the death with them." "I understand, but that old man's words are too infuriating. He clearly doesn't put any of us in his eyes." Gong Xiaoxi took a few deep breaths, but he was still somewhat indignant. Gong Xiaoxi wasn't really stupid. His own master couldn't gain any advantage in front of Elder Nangong, and was even seriously injured. Now that his master's whereabouts were unknown, it showed just how unfathomable Elder Nangong's strength was. He had just broken through to the nascent soul stage. If he were to go up and provoke Elder Nangong based on his hot-bloodedness, it would be like a moth flying into a flame. Therefore, Gong Xiaoxi could only suppress the anger in his heart and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. Chapter 1446. Sai who said it wasn't. Originally I was planning to. Duan Suqing paused. In order to prevent Gong Xiaoxi from being impulsive, he didn't say what he was thinking just now. He only helplessly advised, forget it. Don't be too rash in everything. Let's go back and think about it at length. That's the only way. Now, I can only hope that Immortal Master is lucky and can successfully escape this calamity. As for those treasures, it doesn't matter. If that old thing has the cheek to ask for them, there's no harm in giving them all to him. Gong Shaoxi shook his head in annoyance. He bid farewell to Duan Suqing and prepared to find Gong Ruidong to report the situation just now. He wanted to see if Gong Ruidong could help him with some ideas. Looking at the messy parlor after the battle, Duan Suqing felt a headache coming on and rubbed his temples. He ordered the disciples present to clean up the place and ran to supervise the inventory of the treasures. Duan Suqing planned to personally comb through all the treasures and hide some of the higher-grade treasures in advance. He didn't want all the good things to be snatched away by Elder Nangong. If that happened, he would really regret it till his intestines turned green. The Burning Heavens faction was in chaos for a few days. At the gate of a house a few hundred kilometers away from the Lucian prefecture, two figures of an old man and a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man was the mysterious young master. After a long period of medication and recuperation, the injuries on his face had finally completely healed. The bandages that were originally wrapped around his face were completely removed and he returned to his normal appearance. The young master, who had just recovered, immediately began to deal with some matters that were previously inconvenient for him to handle personally. The first thing he did was to call Elder Shin and ask him to immediately bring him to a secret prison where prisoners were locked up. He was prepared to personally interrogate an extremely important prisoner. After walking for a while with many twists and turns, Elder Shin led the young master to an extremely ordinary-looking house. After passing through the gate, the two of them did not walk in the direction of the room. Instead, they went straight to the back garden and walked to the side of a fake mountain. It was unknown what mechanism Elder Shin stretched out his hand and turned, but a door suddenly appeared at the bottom of the rockery. After pushing it open, it was pitch black inside. Elder Shin took the lead and walked in, and the young master followed closely behind. After the two of them entered the door slowly closed and turned back into a rockery. From the outside there was no trace of it at all. Passing through the dark and damp walkway, the two of them arrived outside of a relatively luxurious and clean prison cell. Elder Shin took the first step and respectfully pushed open the door. After which, he bent his waist and waited by the side. The young master nodded his head in satisfaction. With his hands behind his back, he walked in with his chest puffed out and his hands behind his back. However, when he entered the cell and saw the woman locked inside, he couldn't help but freeze. He stood rooted to the spot and didn't recover for a long time. The woman was originally sitting on the chair in a daze, bored to death. When she heard the footsteps, she raised her beautiful face and glanced at the person with her beautiful eyes. Her body trembled and her expression was a little sluggish. It was actually this guy? Why is he here? Isn't this too inconceivable? It's you. After a long while, the two of them finally came back to their senses. The young master's eyes were full of confusion, and the beautiful woman was also confused. They pointed at each other and shouted in unison with faces full of surprise. Cheng Minjing, how did you enter the cultivation world? The young master furrowed his brows and took 2 steps forward, staring at Cheng Minjing as he asked. Looking at Cheng Minjing's beautiful face, the young master didn't have the slightest bit of appreciation. He thought to himself, no wonder his eyelids had jumped for no reason when he heard the name Cheng Yaoyao. So it was Cheng Minjing, that troublesome girl. What's it to you? Cheng Minjing snorted and rolled her eyes at the young master with a face full of disgust. She said huffily, I didn't think that you wouldn't die. You're quite lucky. However, when my servant Xiao Chen arrives, you'll still die. When he heard Xiao Chen's name, the young master's expression changed slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment, then stared at Cheng Minjing and asked, You've actually cultivated to the nascent soul great circle in such a short amount of time? How did you do it? Could it be that there's some sort of special cultivation method? Don't ask me so many questions. Since you know how powerful it is, then don't offend me. Cheng Minjing fiercely waved her little fist and bared her teeth at the young master. You'd better know your place and let me go. Otherwise, I'll find Xiao Chen later and make you perform some sort of flying performance. I'll just fly you to your death. You're dreaming. You'd better stay here obediently for me. The young master was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He reckoned that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of this little chili pepper, so he simply turned around and left the cell with a flick of his sleeves. When he walked out of the cell, Elder Shin hurriedly lowered his head in fear. He had been standing outside the entire time, and although he couldn't hear what was being said inside clearly, the tone of the two wasn't very pleasant to the ear. He didn't know if there was some sort of conflict, so he couldn't help but feel uneasy. The young master stood in front of the cell for a while, his expression constantly changing. It was obvious that he was thinking intensely. Elder Shin didn't dare to speak and stood respectfully on the spot, waiting. Let's go. After a while, the young master seemed to have finally made some sort of decision. He simply said 2 words and then walked out. Elder Shin hurriedly followed behind him. After leaving the dungeon and walking out of the fake mountain, the young master looked left and right. When he didn't see anyone, he lowered his voice and instructed Elder Shin, "Later, take my warrant and bring that magic tool over. Control that little girl inside. Don't let her have any way to cause trouble." Elder Shin was slightly startled and looked in the direction of the dungeon. He didn't really understand why this little girl who had been obediently staying in the dungeon would suddenly cause trouble. However, he didn't dare to disobey the young master's orders, so he immediately nodded and agreed before retreating. The young master let out a breath and put his hands behind his back. On the surface he pretended to be calm, but in reality he hurriedly walked to a rather secluded room in the courtyard. He quickly poured a basin of water, then took out a voice transmission talisman and threw it into the water. He silently muttered a few words and waited for the other party's reply. "Young master, I've fortunately completed the task that you asked me to do. I've already taken care of it." A wave of bubbles quickly surfaced in the water, then an old voice rang out. "Oh, Elder Nangong is indeed extraordinary. I really didn't misjudge you." The young master nodded in satisfaction and asked again, "Since the task has been completed, why didn't you return immediately? Did anything happen?" Chapter 1447. This. Elder Nangong's voice was a little hesitant, but he still answered honestly, "In the process of carrying out the task, I accidentally got injured, so I need some time to recuperate. Do you have any new instructions? If there are other urgent things to do, then you may need to send someone else." "What? You're injured?" The young master was shocked and asked eagerly, "Elder Nangong, your cultivation is so high, how can you be injured? Has the opponent's strength already surpassed yours?" In the young master's impression, Elder Nangong should be at the peak of the profound ascension stage. Although he was not the top expert in the entire cultivation world, it should be more than enough to deal with the Burning Sky sect. He didn't expect that he would be injured. Elder Nangong stood in the room of the Burning Sky sect with a slightly bitter smile on his face. It turned out that Duan Suqing's guess was right, he really was injured. He just stayed in the Burning Sky sect under the guise of waiting for the treasure to be counted and recuperated. But even so, Elder Nangong really didn't care about this little injury. After all, he had been at the peak of the profound ascension stage for a long time, so his injury was much lighter than Xiao Chen's. Moreover, he had the most precious healing pill of the profound cloud sect with him, plus the 5 disciples by his side, so he only needed to recuperate quietly for a few days. "It's just a small injury, it's not a big deal. Thank you for your concern, young master. I can go back in a few days." Elder Nangong collected his thoughts and said to the water basin, "That's good. I don't know if Elder Nangong has investigated the opponent's background?" The young master's voice quickly came back. It was obvious that he was more concerned about the situation of the opponent. "I did not investigate his background in detail. However, when I was fighting against him, I heard others call him Xiao Chang. Furthermore, the magic tools he used were extremely unique. There was a flying sword that seemed to have developed intelligence. Furthermore, there was a bluish-purple flame. I suspect that it was a type of heavenly flame. Unfortunately, I was unable to capture it." Elder Nangong frowned and recalled for a while before reporting in detail. "Xiao Chang. Xiao Qin." The young master repeated it a few times. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he came to a conclusion. This Xiao Chang was most likely the Xiao Qin that Qing Menjing had mentioned. I can't believe he really came to the world of cultivators. "Elder Nangong, how was your match with Xiao Chang?" After the young master confirmed the suspicions in his heart, he immediately asked, "I know that you must have obtained a complete victory. However, I mainly want to know what happened to that fellow in the end." "Oh, that brat was already on the verge of death after being beaten by me. He was heavily injured and on the verge of death. Although he was carried away by a woman who used that flying sword to escape, based on the injuries he suffered, he probably won't be able to live for long," Elder Nangong said casually. "Elder Nangong, are you sure that he won't be able to live? Did you send people to continue tracking him?" The young master did not give up and said in a deep voice, "According to what I know, that fellow is extremely cunning. It would be best if you could personally... No, it would be best if you could bring his corpse back and let me personally confirm it." The reason why he was so cautious was because the young master understood Xiao Qin better. He was very familiar with his unkillable cockroach-like nature. Even if he was beaten to a state where he was on his last breath, as long as he was not killed directly, he would make a comeback in no time. There had never been a situation where he died from serious injuries. I don't think that's necessary, right? Elder Nangong's tone was somewhat impatient. Do you still have any doubts about me? I dare to guarantee that that brat definitely won't be able to live. You don't have to worry about this. In actuality, Elder Nangong did not have much respect for this young master. At that time, he had only agreed to deal with Xiao Chen because the great master had personally stepped forward. Originally, Elder Nangong already felt a little sullen when he was being ordered around by a little brat. In the end, the other party actually did not trust him. This was simply preposterous. Alright, then rest well for a while. It won't be too late to come back after you've recovered. I will send people to confirm again. You don't have to worry about it. The young master could naturally hear the impatience in Elder Nangong's voice, but he did not dare to continue bickering with him. He could only helplessly pacify him. As the second largest sect in the cultivation world, the Profound Cloud sect had a strong foundation. The young master felt that there was no need to offend them for no reason. It was better to think of a way himself. Just as the young master poured the water out of the basin, Elder Shin knocked on the door and walked in. Young master, I have already used that special magic tool to tie up that girl with the surname Cheng. Elder Shin cupped his hands and reported in a serious manner, as you expected, that magic tool can indeed suppress the vitality in her body, causing her to be unable to use her true strength. Then what should we do with her next? The young master thought for a while and instructed, put her aside for now. There is no need to care about her or interrogate her. In any case, there will definitely be no results from the interrogation. Elder Shin's face instantly turned pale. He stammered and wanted to apologize. Sorry young master, we tried our best, but, before Elder Shin could finish speaking, the young master waved his hand and said indifferently, I have no intention of blaming you. I know this girl. She has always been a thorn, so there is no need to care about her for now. I have other things for you to do. Alright, please instruct me, young master. I will definitely do my best to complete the task you have given me. When Elder Shin heard that he was not going to be punished, he immediately became spirited and patted his chest. The young master nodded his head and took out a map of the cultivation world from the bookshelf. He spread it out on the table and looked at it carefully. Then he used a pen to circle an area on the map and instructed, bring more people and carefully search this area for the whereabouts of a person called Xiao Chen. That person might also change his name to Xiao Chang. After you find him, immediately kill him and bring his corpse back to me. Do you understand? And understood. Subordinate obeys. When Elder Shin heard that this task was much simpler than interrogating a hostage without any torture, he immediately nodded his head happily. After listening to the young master's description of Xiao Chen's appearance, Elder Shin left the room. He called a few profound ascending stage experts and a group of nascent soul peak stage subordinates. He took the map that the young master gave him and rushed towards the marked location. Chapter 1448. On Xiao Chen's side, Hongzhu gripped the hilt of his flying sword in one hand and carried the unconscious Xiao Chen in the other. In order to escape from the burning sky faction, he was like a headless fly that was randomly bumping around, until he finally ran into an unknown mountain forest. Sensing that Xiao Chen's breathing was gradually weakening, Hongzhu could not help but panic. Lowering his head, he searched around and finally found a suitable cave. He immediately ordered the flying sword to stop and landed outside the cave. Hongzhu first had the flying sword explore the cave, and after not finding anything out of the ordinary, he supported Xiao Chen into the cave. After finding a relatively large and flat rock, he carefully placed Xiao Chen on top of it, then hurriedly took out the medicinal pills he had brought with him and stuffed them into his mouth. These medicinal pills had been specially brought over by Hongzhu from the martial arts world, and were basically refined from rare medicinal herbs that the Hong family had accumulated over 100 years. Moreover, the majority of them had very good healing effects, and even if one was able to eat one of them, there would still be hope for a full recovery. At this moment, Hongzhu was already panicking, and no matter what kind of medicinal pills he took, he stuffed them all into Xiao Chen's mouth. Although these healing pills melted in Xiao Chen's mouth the moment they entered his mouth, and all of them were successfully ingested, the healing effects were not very obvious. The only thing that could be seen was that Xiao Chen's complexion had become slightly rosier, but his entire body was still completely motionless. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that his life was still quietly and swiftly slipping away. Hongzhu anxiously stood by the side for a while, and fed all the medicinal pills he could use to Xiao Chen, but there was still no improvement. At this moment, Hongzhu finally realized that just relying on medicinal pills would not be able to solve Xiao Chen's problem. The anxious Hongzhu could not help but stand up, and anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, racking his brain to think of a way to save Xiao Chen. After pondering for a long time, Hongzhu's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly returned to Xiao Chen's side and helped him into a cross-legged sitting position against the stone wall. Glancing around the empty cave, Hongzhu clenched his teeth, quickly and neatly took off his clothes and placed them aside. After that, he sat down cross-legged and placed his palms against Xiao Chen's, intending to enter a dual cultivation state with him. Just now, Hongzhu suddenly recalled that he had once heard Xiao Chen mention that a cultivator's origin qi could aid in healing injuries. Although he did not know exactly how to do it, Xiao Chen was currently unconscious. No matter how Hongzhu thought about it, it seemed like the only way to transfer his origin qi to Xiao Chen's body was to rely on the method of dual cultivation. In Hongzhu's mind, after he transmitted his own origin qi over, he would then attempt to guide it. Perhaps he would be able to use it to heal Xiao Chen's injuries. Just as Hongzhu was calming her mind and circulating her mental cultivation method, and then through her palms began to transfer her yuan qi into Xiao Chen's body, she suddenly felt a powerful energy suddenly appear, completely sucking away all of her yuan qi. Before Hongzhu could react, her yuan qi reappeared and was swiftly reflected back at her from Xiao Chen's palms. Caught off guard, Hongzhu was directly struck by the yuan qi she had sent out, and her entire body was sent flying. Piff! Hongzhu's back was fiercely smashed against the stone wall, and she could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The powerful impact had shaken her entire body to the point of dizziness, causing her to see stars and her qi and blood to churn. If Hongzhu had not been clenching her teeth and using her tenacious willpower to support herself, she might have fainted long ago. How could this be? Hongzhu sat on the ground in a daze for a long time, repeatedly muttering to herself, her body like an autumn leaf in the wind, trembling incessantly. She climbed to her feet with great difficulty, and when she saw Xiao Chen quietly lying on the ground, not moving at all, Hongzhu's eyes instantly turned red, and 2 streams of tears of grievance slid down her cheeks. After taking a few steps forward, Hongzhu threw herself onto Xiao Chen's body, her heart filled with sorrow as she sobbed. Xiao Chen, just what do I have to do to wake you up? How can I restore you to your original state? I've already used every method within my power, but why can't I succeed? Aren't you usually very powerful? Can't you wake up and teach me? Say something. Gently stroking Xiao Chen's cheeks with trembling hands, Hongzhu could clearly feel that the latter's life was gradually fading away. She could not help but feel great sorrow in her heart. The emotions that she had been suppressing at the bottom of her heart finally erupted, and she tightly hugged Xiao Chen's lifeless body. Xiao Chen, can you hear me calling you? Pressing her face against Xiao Chen's palm, Hongzhu softly whispered, "Why are you always so cold to me? Do you hate me a lot? Can you answer me seriously for once? Do you know how much pressure I've been enduring to silently like you? I've been a rebellious child since I was a child, and I can even ignore the advice of my family. It may seem like I'm free and unbridled, but can you understand the pain of being despised by your closest kin? You must be able to understand. Weren't you also chased out of the house by your family? From this, it can be seen that we are in the same boat. No wonder when I first saw you, I felt a sense of kinship. Xiao Chen, you little scoundrel. You've always been hot and cold to Big Sister, but now you've finally behaved yourself, haven't you? You can only lie flat on the ground and let Big Sister tease you, but why do I wish that you can bully me again? Even if it's just to hide a little further away." Lifting his face from Xiao Chen's hand, Hongzhu's face was already streaked with tears. It was already late at night, and the silvery white moonlight spilled over the cave entrance, illuminating the dark green vines and branches. It looked very tranquil and peaceful, but the atmosphere in the cave was very solemn and sorrowful. Staring at Xiao Chen's pale cheeks, Hongzhu could not help but feel a wave of sorrow in her heart. Could it be that he really could not escape this calamity? Could it be that she really had to watch him stop breathing and leave her behind? Gritting her teeth, Hongzhu put on some clothes, picked up Xiao Chen and walked out of the cave. Leaning against a rock, she rested her head on Xiao Chen's chest, her eyes gazing at the twinkling stars in the sky. "Xiao Chen, look at that brightest star, it seems to be the Big Dipper. Many people like to rely on it to guide them, and in fact you are very much like my Big Dipper. As long as I can follow you, I will definitely not go wrong. Xiao Chen, this is the first time that Big Sister has accompanied you to watch the stars, and it might also be the last time we do so. In the past, I really wanted to find a chance to have a romantic moment with you, and now my wish has finally come true. It's just that. I never thought that it would be under such terrible circumstances, hee hee. Reaching out to stroke her hair, Hongzhu bitterly smiled and shook her head, her voice somewhat choked with emotion. Chapter 1449. Actually, when we were at Little Hong's pharmacy, I already started to like you a little. I began to quietly pay attention to you and even developed a good impression of you. I just didn't have the time to tell you. I always pretended to tease you. Woo woo woo. As she spoke, Hongzhu sensed that Xiao Chen's body temperature was slowly dropping, her breathing was becoming extremely weak, and her heartbeat was also becoming slower and slower. The despairing Hongzhu was finally unable to continue speaking. She covered her mouth and sobbed in a low voice, tears pouring out of her eyes like a broken dam. She tightly grasped Xiao Chen's arm, feeling so much pain that even her heart began to wrench. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Chen's body, which Hongzhu had been leaning against, had already become ice-cold and lifeless. Her tears had also finally slowly stopped, and her complexion had gradually calmed down. Hongzhu sniffled, first wiped away the tears on her face, and then took off a white porcelain earring from her earlobe. With a casual pinch, the earring broke with a crack, revealing a purplish-black pill. Since you've left, there's no need for me to continue living in this world. Wait for me at the Bridge of Helplessness, we'll be on our way together. Hongzhu carefully tidied up Xiao Chen's clothes as she spoke in a gentle voice. As soon as she finished speaking, Hongzhu stuffed the purplish-black pill into her mouth. When it entered her mouth, she first felt a trace of bitterness, which was quickly followed by a faint sweetness. Hongzhu smiled faintly as she gently leaned against Xiao Chen's chest. As her consciousness gradually grew blurry, she quietly closed her eyes, silently waiting for the effects of the pill to take effect, so that she could fearlessly welcome the moment when death would descend upon her. Suddenly, a fierce gale began to blow all around them, uprooting many flowers and plants. Not far away, a large and sturdy locust tree was also swaying incessantly, its leaves drifting down along with the wind, forming a huge vortex that sparkled with white light that gradually approached Xiao Chen and Hongzhu's position. Just as the whirlpool arrived in front of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu, it immediately stopped spinning. Many leaves and weeds fell to the ground with a rustling sound, while the white light gradually condensed and transformed into the illusory figure of an old man. Standing in front of the two, the old man looked at the pale-faced and lifeless Xiao Chen, as well as the smiling Hongzhu, whose eyes were tightly closed. He shook his head slightly and sighed helplessly. Then he extended his hand and injected a strand of white gas into Hongzhu's body. After that, he placed his hand behind his back and stood there, quietly waiting. Cough cough cough. Not long after, Hongzhu suddenly coughed violently a few times, opened his mouth and spat out a puddle of black liquid, and then slowly opened his eyes. Blinking her eyes in confusion, Hongzhu could only see a ball of white light faintly appearing in front of her eyes. She shook her head to clear her head, then weakly said, What's going on? Am I already dead? Why is there a white light? Little girl, don't be silly, you're still alive. The white silhouette said with a frown. I'm still alive? Hongzhu repeated those words with a confused expression, clearly unable to react. The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Chen, then turned back to look at Hongzhu and asked, Little girl, you're so young, how could you take things so hard? You're clearly alive and well, so why did you come to this barren mountain to die? Hongzhu finally came to her senses, but when she saw the white silhouette in front of her, she immediately jumped in fright. Are you a human or a ghost? The frightened Hongzhu hurriedly dodged to the side, but unexpectedly bumped into a soft and fluffy object. She quickly turned her head to look, only to see that it was the lifeless Xiao Chen lying beside her. Xiao Chen, sob sob sob. Upon seeing Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's sorrowful emotions welled up in his heart once again. It seemed that he really was not dead. He just did not know what had saved him. Sigh. This old man is not a human, nor is he a ghost, but the mountain god of this barren mountain. The white silhouette was not angered by Hongzhu's questioning, and only leisurely paced back and forth in front of the two of them. When she mentioned her identity, she even proudly raised her chin, and her aura seemed to have become much stronger. What? Mountain god? Then you're an immortal? Hongzhu was slightly taken aback, then suddenly thought of something and immediately pounced towards the old man, but in the end she missed and fell to the ground. After all, that old man was only a silhouette and not a real existence. Hong Zhu didn't care too much about it and immediately got up after falling, knelt on the ground and begged the white silhouette, Great Immortal, can you save my boyfriend? Your boyfriend? What happened to him? The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Qin, a trace of doubt in her voice. Hong Zhu also turned his head to look at Xiao Qin, and felt a pain in his heart. He turned back to look at the silhouette and said with difficulty, He's already dead, but I think that with your boundless magic power, you should be able to bring him back to life, right? What? You said he's dead? The white silhouette raised her eyebrows in great surprise, then stretched out a slightly illusory hand and lightly touched Xiao Chen's face. Her face immediately became somewhat displeased and she blushed and said, Little girl, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? He's clearly still alive. Look at his flushed little face and his breathing is quite smooth, which part of him looks like a dead person? Don't try to deceive this old man. No? He's really dead. If you don't believe me you can. Hong Zhu said in an urgent voice, then turned his head to point at Xiao Qin, and with a single glance her expression suddenly changed. What's going on? Xiao Qin clearly stopped breathing just a moment ago. Why does he seem to be reacting now? Seeing Xiao Chen's pale cheeks slowly turn rosy, Hong Zhu could not believe her own eyes. She stupidly knelt on the ground for a moment, then finally realized what was happening and rushed over to Xiao Qin. With a trembling finger she took Xiao Chen's breath and found that he really was breathing. So, Xiao Qin. Hong Zhu's entire person was shrouded in inconceivable ecstasy, and tears once again flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Although Hong Zhu felt joy from the bottom of her heart, there was still a question lingering in her mind. She had clearly seen Xiao Chen's life force disappear, so how did he recover so quickly? But at this moment Hong Zhu did not care about such things. She constantly shook Xiao Qin, calling out his name, hoping that he would open his eyes and look at her, but Xiao Qin still did not respond, and only his steady breathing proved that he was still alive. Chapter 1450. Don't shake him anymore. This boy is just not dead yet, but that doesn't mean that he isn't injured. If you keep shaking him like this, he might die from your shaking again. The white figure looked a little rueful, but he quickly spoke up to stop Hong Zhu. Hong Zhu was startled and carefully placed Xiao Qin back to his original position. At this moment, a scene suddenly flashed through her mind. When she had begged the white figure to save Xiao Qin, he had touched Xiao Chen's cheek, and then Xiao Qin had regained his breathing. Could it be that it was precisely because he had casually touched Xiao Qin that Xiao Qin had been pulled back from the brink of death? Could it be that this old man shrouded in white light was really the legendary Great Firmament Golden Immortal? This was simply too miraculous. What are you still standing there for? Seeing Hong Zhu staring at him in a daze, the white figure seemed a little uncomfortable. He pointed at Xiao Qin and said, Although this kid is still alive, a few of the main meridians in his body have been severed. If we don't use medicine to heal them as soon as possible, it's very likely that he'll really die. Lord Great Immortal, I beg you to lend me a hand and show me the way. Xiao Qin, he can't die. Otherwise, I won't be able to continue living. Hong Zhu's heart trembled at these words and she knelt down with a thump, begging with all her heart. The white figure stroked his non-existent beard and lowered his head in thought for a moment. Then, under Hong Zhu's hopeful gaze, he slowly said, This old man does have a way to save him, but Hong Zhu could not help but be wild with joy at the old man's words. She even completely ignored the word, but, and instead asked with an expectant expression, Really? You have a way to save Xiao Chen's life? As she spoke, Hong Zhu became somewhat hesitant. She was an exceptionally intelligent girl in the first place. Earlier she had been shocked by Xiao Chen's sudden resurrection. Now that she had calmed down a little, she began to vaguely suspect the old man's motives. They had only met by chance, so why was he willing to save Xiao Chen's life? Moreover, even her own poison had been easily neutralized. This guy, could it be that he had some ulterior motives? Haha, you must be very puzzled as to why I would help you expel the poison from your body and even save his life, right? The white figure seemed to have guessed Hong Zhu's thoughts as he smiled faintly and spoke in an indifferent tone. Hong Zhu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded vigilantly. The white shadow chuckled and explained in an unhurried manner, Actually, I can tell that all of you are kind-hearted people. However, due to a freak combination of factors, you were injured by some extremely vicious and evil people, which is why you ended up in such a state. As a divine immortal, it is my duty to uphold justice, so how can I sit back and do nothing? This? Alright. Then I'll believe you. Please tell me the method to save them as soon as possible. No matter what the conditions are, as long as I can do it, I will definitely do my best. Hongzhu still had some misgivings in her heart, but she still clenched her teeth and agreed. Although Hongzhu felt that the White Shadow's reasoning was a little strange, after weighing the pros and cons, she could only rely on this so-called divine immortal at the moment. In any case, the situation could not get any worse. As long as the White Shadow's request was not too excessive, even if she had to work a little harder, it would still be worth it if she could save Xiao Chen's life. It's very simple. I will first give you a list of medicinal ingredients. As long as you can gather all of these ingredients and boil them into a medicinal soup for him to drink, there will definitely be an effect. However, you will still need to coordinate with a few other auxiliary tasks. If all of them are successful, then it won't be long before he can fully recover. The White Shadow chuckled and spoke in an unhurried manner. What medicinal ingredients? Tell me, I will definitely find them. When Hongzhu heard that the White Shadow wanted to boil medicine and not do some strange things, her heart instantly relaxed and she impatiently asked. The white shadowy figure nodded with satisfaction, then reported the names and dosages of those herbs one by one. These medicinal ingredients are all from the inner. After listening to the White Shadow recite the prescription, Hongzhu was somewhat dazed. She had indeed heard of all the medicinal ingredients that the old divine immortal had mentioned, but the biggest problem now was that these medicinal ingredients could only be grown in the inner martial world. They had never been seen in the world of immortal cultivation. The medicinal ingredients and treasures of heaven and earth produced in the inner martial world were completely different from those in the world of immortal cultivation. Even the medicinal ingredients that Xiao Chen had used to boil the medicine for his breakthrough were unique to the world of immortal cultivation and had nothing to do with the inner martial world. According to Xiao Chen, this was because the concentration of spiritual qi in the inner martial world was different from that in the world of immortal cultivation, so the medicinal ingredients grown in the inner martial world were also different. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing the frown on Hongzhu's face, the White Shadow indifferently asked, could it be that you're going to shrink back after hearing that there are so many medicinal ingredients? Hongzhu hurriedly shook her head in denial and said somewhat gloomily, Mountain Divine Immortal, although the medicinal ingredients that you mentioned are not too precious, I'm afraid that I can't find them in this place. Is there any other substitute for them? Don't lose confidence so quickly. Little girl, you seem to be quite smart. I believe that you will definitely have a way to get these medicinal ingredients. The White Shadow mysteriously winked, deliberately whetting Hongzhu's appetite. Hongzhu frowned. Just as he was worrying about where he could obtain the medicinal ingredients, he heard the white figure continue, however, the most important thing is not the medicinal ingredients. Rather, while this boy is absorbing the medicinal soup, there is one more thing that needs to be done in order to ensure his life. What else needs to be done? Please tell me. Hongzhu's mind was still on how to find the medicinal ingredients, so when she heard the White Shadow's words, she casually asked. I have to explain first. A serious illness requires fierce medicine. This kid's injuries are too severe, so the medicinal effect of the medicine that this old man has provided is extremely fierce. The White Shadow pointed at Xiao Chen and continued to explain, if this kid is not injured, then after taking this medicine he should be able to hold on for a while. However, you also know that his current condition is not optimistic. After listening for a long time, Hongzhu was still a little confused. He did not know what else needed to be done apart from drinking the medicine, so he could not help but open his mouth to urge, High Immortal, please tell me quickly, what exactly do we need to do? Because he currently only has a sliver of life force left, so the medicinal ingredients that I've listed are the ones with the strongest yang energy and the most vigorous vitality, so. The White Shadow paused, a somewhat hesitant expression on her face. Chapter 1451. Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense. Hongzhu could not help but stomp his feet anxiously as he inwardly ridiculed, why does this old immortal like to keep others in suspense? Can't he see what time it is? What if he delays treating Xiao Chen's injuries? Seeing that Hongzhu was about to explode in anger, the old man still had an awkward expression on his face and could only helplessly say, it's not that this old man wants to keep you in suspense, it's just that this old man doesn't know how to deal with this situation. Pointing at the motionless Xiao Chen, the White Phantom said, as you can see, this boy's injuries are too severe. My prescription is filled with yang attribute medicines. If I were to directly use it, he might not be able to endure it and die. Therefore, I need a medicinal catalyst to balance the yin and yang of the medicine, but this old man really can't think of a suitable method at the moment, which is why I'm so conflicted. Medicinal catalyst? Balance yin and yang? Hongzhu blinked in confusion and asked in confusion, is there no suitable heavenly treasure that can be added to the prescription to directly neutralize the medicinal properties? No, then this medicine will have no effect. The White Phantom shook his head decisively and explained, I originally intended to use the vigorous yang energy to guide him to regain his vitality. If it is directly turned into a neutralizing medicine, then it will be meaningless. Even if he drinks it, there won't be any reaction. Then what should I do? Hongzhu paced back and forth twice, many medicinal herbs that he had seen and understood before circling around in his mind, but for the time being, he could not think of any suitable medicinal primers that could harmonize the yin and yang of the medicine without losing its medicinal properties. Just as Hongzhu was frowning in thought, the White Phantom seemed to sway slightly, the color of its shadow faintly fading. Raising his head to look at the sky, the White Phantom did not give Hongzhu any more time to think and quickly said, think carefully about the specific method. In any case, this old man has already told you everything, you can choose what you want to do. I estimate that this boy can only last for a few more hours at most, any later and it will be too late. If you have made up your mind, don't waste too much time. As soon as he finished speaking, the White Phantom stretched out a hand and tapped Hongzhu's head. Then, his body began to spin rapidly, stirring up the surrounding dried branches and leaves to wrap around his entire body. Hongzhu had just recovered from his shock when he saw a flash of white light. That cluster of leaves suddenly fell to the ground, and the White Phantom image disappeared into thin air. Wait. Immortal, wait a moment, I still don't know where to get the herbs. Hongzhu stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly recalled the source of the medicinal herbs and hurriedly chased after them to ask about it. However, he had barely taken 2 steps when his foot tripped over a rock, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. Ah! Hongzhu abruptly opened his eyes and glanced around in surprise. He found that he had not fallen and was still leaning against Xiao Chen's chest. Moving her body slightly, Hongzhu suddenly heard the faint sound of a heartbeat in her ears. Her fingers were intertwined with Xiao Chen's, and she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, as if he was telling her something. Slowly propping himself up, Hongzhu massaged his swollen temples as he lowered his head to see a pool of black liquid on the ground. He could not help but frown as he muttered, "What is this?" After carefully recalling for a while, Hongzhu still felt that his mind was a complete mess, as if there were some things that he could not remember no matter how hard he tried. Hongzhu shook his head a few times and stared blankly for a while before he muttered to himself, "Oh, I think I had a strange dream. In the dream I met an immortal. He told me to find some herbs to treat Xiao Chen's injuries." At this point Hongzhu's entire body suddenly shook, and a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately crawled to his feet and muttered to himself, Yes, I remember now. There was indeed a white-bearded old man who wanted me to brew some medicine to save Xiao Chen, and he said that he didn't have much time left. It seems that I have to hurry." Just after taking 2 steps, Hongzhu once again paused, his brows knitted together as he pondered. That old man also seemed to have said that other than that prescription, there also needs to be a medicinal catalyst, something that can neutralize yang energy. What is that medicinal catalyst again? Why can't I remember? Hongzhu anxiously paced back and forth for a few steps, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember what the medicinal catalyst that white-bearded old man had mentioned in his dream was. Instead, he clearly remembered the prescription, as if it had been engraved in his mind. "Forget it, I don't care anymore. I'll first prepare the herbs and brew the medicinal soup. I'll think about the medicinal catalyst when the time comes." Hongzhu was afraid that he would think for too long and waste time, so he simply stomped his foot and made up his mind. Bending down to help Xiao Chen up, Hongzhu carefully brought him back to the cave, and laid him flat on the huge rock once more. Looking at the unconscious Xiao Chen, Hongzhu felt a little depressed. He could clearly remember the names of the herbs on the prescription, but in such a desperate situation, where could he go to find those herbs? Time was of the essence, and it was definitely too late to rush to the inner martial world. Furthermore, the key point was that he did not know how to get out of the cultivation world, and that old immortal liked to keep him guessing, insisting that he was smart and would be able to think of a way. Wasn't this clearly a trap? Hongzhu anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, his brain quickly turning, racking his brains for a way that he had not thought of before. Right? After pacing back and forth a few times, Hongzhu's thoughts suddenly flashed like a spark, as if he had caught on to some information. Herbs? Heavenly treasures? That's right. Didn't the Burning Sky faction still keep a bag of heavenly treasures from the inner martial world? There must be something in there that I need. Hongzhu fiercely slapped his forehead, remembering that when he had just entered the cultivation world, he had once inexplicably been smashed by a bag full of heavenly treasures planted by the inner martial world. Later on, it had been collected by Xiao Qin and accompanied him all the way to the Burning Sky faction. If the people of the Burning Sky faction had not cleaned up Xiao Qian's room, then this bag of heavenly treasures should still be in his room. If I bring that bag over, I can brew the medicine. But how should I go and get it? Since the problem of the herbs had been solved, Hongzhu next had to consider the fastest way to obtain it. Since Xiao Qian had escaped with serious injuries, then the Burning Sky faction might have already been occupied by Elder Nangong. Hongzhu reckoned that if he rashly returned, it was very likely that he would walk right into a trap and be caught. Moreover, he had absolutely no idea where he was right now, so even if he wanted to sneak back and retrieve it, it would be a problem. Chapter 1452. The hope that had just sprouted was once again mercilessly doused with a bucket of cold water. This caused Hongzhu to feel anxious from the bottom of her heart. She hurriedly paced back and forth beside Xiao Qin, repeatedly thinking of a feasible solution, but her mind remained completely blank. Just as she was beginning to despair, Hongzhu suddenly felt something flash in the corner of her eye. She raised her head in astonishment and discovered that the flash of light had come from outside the cave. Following the light and walking out of the cave, Hongzhu discovered that there was a sword hilt stuck in the ground. She casually pulled out the sword hilt, and shockingly discovered that it was the flying sword that had brought her and Xiao Qin to escape from the Burning Heaven faction and staggered to this place. Looking at the flying sword in her hand, a thought suddenly flashed through Hongzhu's mind. She hesitated for a moment, but still opened her mouth to ask, "Hey you, a flying sword, can you help me steal something from the Burning Heaven faction?" Although she felt that her actions were a little foolish, Hongzhu had already lost her sense of propriety and was not willing to let go of any method. As soon as she finished speaking, the flying sword suddenly left Hongzhu's palm and floated in front of her, as if waiting for further instructions. Hongzhu was stunned for a moment. Then he described in a probing manner, "That thing is in the room that Xiao Qin and I were staying in. It's a gray bag and it's filled with natural treasures. Xiao Qin brought it over from the inner martial world. Can you help me steal it back as soon as possible? Xiao Qin's life is completely in your hands. The earlier you return, the more hope we have." Whoosh! As if it understood Hongzhu's words, the flying sword first flew back to the cave and circled around Xiao Qin a few times. Then, with a piercing sound, it turned into a streak of light and shot out of the cave like a bolt of lightning. It seemed to be returning to the Burning Heaven faction to retrieve the medicinal ingredients. Watching as the flying sword instantly turned into a small black dot in the sky, Hongzhu suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly formed the shape of a trumpet with her hands, placed them by her mouth and loudly yelled, "Hey! Remember to bring back a pot to boil medicine." When the traces of the flying swords completely disappeared, Hongzhu realized that there was now hope of solving the most important problem. His spirits immediately rose and he no longer felt tired. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and began to collect dry wood from the nearby forest. He even found a stone with a depression and filled a nearby stream with some clean water for later use. Although the strange roars of unknown wild beasts could be heard from time to time around the cave, Hongzhu did not have the time to care about that right now. He did not even have the time to feel the slightest bit of fear as he nimbly picked up the wood and returned to the cave with the stone filled with water. After he had finished preparing everything he needed, Hongzhu went to a corner of the cave and found a sharp protruding rock. He dug a hole in the ground and placed the wood in it. In this way, when the flying sword returned with the herbs, he would be able to boil the medicinal soup as soon as possible. After packing up everything, Hongzhu quietly sat down at Xiao Qian's side. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked the latter's slightly cold face, his expression still extremely solemn. When he had been preparing the various herbs, Hongzhu had been trying hard to recall what the old man in his dream had told him about the medicinal primer, but he had not been able to recall it. Hongzhu could only vaguely remember that the white-bearded old man had said that because the medicine was extremely young and fierce, something had to be used to balance the yin and yang of the medicine. Only then would the severely injured Xiao Qin not die from the impact of the medicinal efficacy. However, the medicinal primer could not be used directly in the decoction of the medicine and could only be used on its own, lest the medicine lose its effectiveness. In this short period of time, Hongzhu had already recalled all the medicinal primers that he had seen and not seen, and even those that he had only read about in ancient texts. Most of them did not seem to be very effective, and there were some herbs that seemed to be effective, but there was no way to obtain them in this place and time. What should I do? What kind of medicinal primer can neutralize the medicinal properties, and it just so happens that I can get my hands on it right now? Hongzhu rubbed his hair in distress. Just as he was feeling depressed, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Hongzhu turned his head towards the source of the sound, and saw that the flying sword had just returned from outside the cave. There was a bulging gray bundle hanging on the sword's body, and it was also carrying a small pot which was used to boil medicine. Inside the pot was a medicine bowl. Seeing this scene, Hongzhu immediately threw all his conflicted feelings to the back of his mind. He quickly ran over and carefully removed the cloth bag, pots and bowls from the ground. When he opened the gray bundle, he found that it was indeed filled with heavenly materials and earthly treasures. There were no signs that it had been tampered with. Hongzhu could not help but cheer. Great! Husband Xiaoqin can be saved now. Flying sword, you have done a meritorious deed. And Xiaomo was also a little excited. She controlled the flying sword to swing left and right, circling around the cave several times to express her excitement. Hongzhu carefully examined the bag again and confirmed that there were no problems with the medicinal herbs in the bundle. He then carefully selected the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he needed and placed them into the pot in order. After that, he picked up the stone bowl and added some water before placing the pot on top of the firewood. Xiaoqin, hold on a little longer, the medicine will be ready soon. Hongzhu murmured to himself as he glanced back at Xiaoqin. He then took out a flint from his bosom and lit the wood under the pot, beginning to patiently decoct the medicine. After waiting for another half an hour or so, a medicinal aroma finally wafted out from the pot and pervaded the narrow cave. Seeing that the medicinal soup was almost done, Hongzhu did not care about how hot it was. He quickly picked up the pot and slowly poured the finished soup into a bowl. Holding the bowl of medicine, Hongzhu walked to Xiaoqian's side and sat down. He stared at the rich medicinal soup in the bowl and began to worry again. But the medicinal catalyst? What is the medicinal catalyst? If Xiaoqin didn't have a medicinal primer, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to endure the intense yang energy after drinking the medicine. However, if he didn't drink the medicine, it would only take a few hours for Xiaoqin to stop breathing and lose his life forever. Forget it, let's drink the medicine first. What if husband Xiaoqin is strong-willed and has a vigorous life force, allowing him to make it through? Hongzhu was afraid that if he thought for too long, the medicinal soup would turn cold and lose its medicinal effect. He simply clenched his teeth and supported Xiaoqin with his left hand while holding the bowl with his right. He first pried open Xiaoqin's teeth and then fed the medicinal soup to Xiaoqin bit by bit. Fortunately, although Xiaoqin was unconscious, he had not lost the ability to swallow. In just a short while he had drunk the entire bowl of medicinal soup. Seeing that the bowl of medicine was almost empty, Hongzhu's heart finally relaxed. He hurriedly put the bowl aside and carefully observed Xiaoqin's reaction, hoping that he could successfully make it through this stage without relying on the medicinal catalyst. Chapter 1453. Ugh. Xiaoqin finally moved after drinking the medicine. He wrinkled his eyebrows imperceptibly, and a low moan came from his throat. His originally somewhat cold body temperature gradually rose, and his breathing became much more even. His expression also looked much more spirited than before. Husband Xiaoqin, how do you feel? Hongzhu called out tentatively, only to find that Xiaoqin did not respond at all. However, his body temperature had already exceeded the standard temperature and was still rising. His skin had also begun to turn slightly red, and it felt somewhat hot to the touch. Inadvertently glancing over, Hongzhu saw that a certain part of Xiaoqin's body was actually slowly propping up a small tent, and from the looks of it, it was possible that his pants would explode at any moment. Husband Xiaoqin, can you hear me? Open your eyes and look at me, okay? Seeing Xiaoqin's reaction, Hongzhu's face immediately flushed red. As someone who understood medicine, she knew that this was a natural physiological reaction caused by excessive yang energy. However, she still felt a little embarrassed in her heart, so she could only continue to call out to Xiaoqin in order to divert her attention. But no matter how she called out to him, Xiaoqin still did not move. Besides the reaction of that part of his body, the only other signs of movement were his body temperature, which was growing increasingly hot, and his skin that was so red that it was almost transparent. Seeing this situation, Hongzhu could not help but look anxious. She first touched Xiao Chen's burning hot forehead, and then simply placed both her hands on it, wanting to use her normal body temperature to help him cool down. Phew. As soon as Xiao Chen touched the cool skin on Hongzhu's hands, he seemed to sigh in comfort, and the situation slightly eased. But not long after, Hongzhu's hands also began to heat up, and the heat from Xiao Chen's body had even begun to burn her hands. What should I do? Xiao Chen's husband doesn't seem to be able to hold on for much longer. Hongzhu's eyes darted around anxiously, and suddenly her gaze landed on the tall little Xiao Chen, and a bolt of lightning seemed to suddenly flash through her mind. Could it be that she needed to do that thing? Harmony of yin and yang, harmony of yin and yang. Hongzhu repeated these words over and over again, feeling more and more that it might really be as he thought. Men were of the yang attribute, while women were of the yin attribute. Originally, the combination of the two could neutralize the yin and yang, not to mention that she was still a virgin. Wouldn't the medicine that Xiao Chen took be the right medicine? But, when she thought about how she was going to end up like the unconscious Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's beautiful face couldn't help but blush. She tugged at the corner of her clothes with her left hand and bit her lower lip, not knowing what to do. Her mind was a complete mess. Don't be fooled by how Hongzhu often talked about the matters between men and women, as if she was very open. That was all to tease Xiao Chen. She herself was just a little girl without any actual combat experience. If she really had to take the initiative to face it, just imagining the scene would make her feel extremely shy. But apart from this method, there didn't seem to be any other solution. It wasn't that Hongzhu didn't want to join with Xiao Chen, she just felt a little regretful in her heart. After all, this was her first time while Xiao Chen was still unconscious. Moreover, they were in a simple and crude cave, which didn't seem to be a very good feeling. As her thoughts ran wild, Hongzhu's expression kept changing. One moment she was shy, the next moment she was conflicted, the next moment she was nervous and melancholy. She couldn't even tell what she was really thinking in her heart. Ugh. Just as Hongzhu was feeling extremely distressed, Xiao Chen suddenly moved and let out a low moan that sounded like he was in extreme pain. Hongzhu hurriedly raised her head to look and discovered that Xiao Chen's entire body was very tense. The blood vessels under his skin were clearly visible. Moreover, she could see with her eyes that Xiao Chen's pulse was beating extremely quickly. It was already not the speed that a normal person should have. Seeing this posture, Hongzhu knew that she should no longer hesitate. She let out a long breath and stood up as if she had finally made up her mind. In Hongzhu's opinion, regardless of whether this method would work or not, he had to give it a try first. Xiao Chen had already reached the most critical juncture. If he didn't give it a try, he would die either way. It was better to try it as a last resort. It might even have a miraculous effect. After standing up, Hongzhu did not hesitate at all and immediately began to unbutton her clothes. But she had only unbuttoned a few buttons when she suddenly paused, as if she had thought of something. She suddenly turned her head and shouted to the flying sword that was guarding the side, "That flying sword, you go out for a while. Guard the outside and help us keep an eye on it. Don't let anyone, or any creature come close." When Xiaoma, who was hiding in the flying sword, heard Hongzhu's order, he was a little puzzled for a moment. It had been a night and there was no danger, so why did she suddenly say that she wanted to go out and guard the cave? But now that Xiao Chen was unconscious, and Xiaoma did not dare to speak rashly. Helplessly, he circled around the two of them a few times before flying out of the cave resentfully. After confirming that the flying sword had left the cave and could no longer see her and Xiao Chen's situation, Hongzhu began to undress with a peace of mind. In fact, Hongzhu had lied just now. She was not worried that someone or an animal would suddenly come over to cause trouble in broad daylight. She just vaguely felt that this flying sword seemed to be more human-like and had already developed spiritual intelligence. If she and Xiao Chen were to, at that time, this fellow would be watching from the side. Hongzhu felt that something was a little strange, so she deliberately found an excuse to send it away in advance. In just a short while, Xiao Chen's body had become hotter and hotter. His face was red and beginning to turn purple. His forehead was dripping with sweat and his brows were tightly furrowed, looking like he was in great pain. Hongzhu did not dare to delay any longer. She first took off her own clothes and then took off all the clothes on Xiao Chen's body. Looking at the naked and motionless Xiao Chen in front of him, Hongzhu moved her eyes to a certain place with difficulty. After staring blankly for a while, her mind instantly went blank and she did not know what to do. Ugh. Xiao Chen suddenly trembled slightly and let out a suppressed groan. The veins on his neck popped out as if he was enduring great pain. Only then did Hong Zhu come to his senses. He knew that there wasn't much time left, and he couldn't allow himself to think any further. He could only try his best to recall those Japanese action movies he had secretly watched in the past. Referencing the methods in those movies, he climbed onto Xiao Chen's body and slowly sat down. Ouch! It hurts, damn it, Hong Zhu's coquettish voice faintly came from the cave. It sounded like it would cause one's imagination to run wild, but it was impossible to figure out the real situation. Chapter 1454. And Xiaoma was originally wandering around the entrance of the cave in boredom. After hearing the commotion, he thought that something had happened in the cave and was about to rush in to protect him. Before he could move, he heard some strange but ambiguous sounds. Only then did he come to a sudden realization and immediately stopped. And Xiaoma, who was still a little puzzled at first, was now extremely embarrassed. He had to pretend that nothing had happened and swayed left and right twice. Then he controlled the flying sword to fly further away and really went on patrol. The cave was full of spring scenery. The originally somewhat cold air seemed to have warmed up a lot because of the friction. Although there was only one person moving at this time, it formed an extremely beautiful picture. It was not until half an hour later that the shaking picture finally stopped. Hong Zhu was seen lying softly on Xiao Chen's body, panting slightly and sweating all over. There was a tired but satisfied smile on his face. Hong Zhu could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's originally soaring body temperature was gradually falling and slowly returning to normal. Most importantly, after the exercise was over, a strong yuan qi suddenly emerged in Xiao Chen's body. Phew! Xiao Chen suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of turbid gas. His whole body seemed to have been struck by lightning. He trembled a few times before his brain recovered. Feeling as if something warm was pressing against his body, Xiao Chen opened his eyes slightly. The first thing he saw was a blurry silhouette leaning against his body. He was immediately startled, but when he took a closer look, he discovered that the person was actually Hong Zhu. Husband Xiao Chen. You're finally awake. Seeing that Xiao Chen had opened his eyes, Hong Zhu could not help but be overjoyed. She reached out to touch his cheek and raised her 5 fingers in front of his eyes. What's wrong? Where are we? What are you doing? Xiao Chen blinked his eyes in confusion. When he lowered his head to take a look, he realized that the two of them were currently stuck together naked. Furthermore, they were in contact with each other at a negative distance. He was shocked once again and could not even speak fluently. Hong Zhu, on the other hand, did not notice that much. Instead, he happily wrapped his arms around Xiao Chen's neck and buried his face in his chest. Unable to contain his joy, he said, "Looks like that old immortal didn't lie after all. I didn't really believe him at first. I didn't expect it to really work. These days I was worried about you. It's great that you're fine now." Oh. Hong Zhu, who was originally full of joy, could not help but cry. His heart was filled with all kinds of different emotions such as happiness and bitterness. When he recalled their miserable encounters over the past few days, his extreme worry for Xiao Chen's injuries, as well as his feelings of despair and unwillingness, Hong Zhu could not help but have mixed feelings in his heart. It was a very unpleasant feeling. Fortunately, Xiao Chen had finally recovered. Otherwise, he really did not know what to do. Wait, where did this old immortal come from? What are you talking about? Also, how did we, that? Xiao Chen felt his chest become a little moist. He knew that Hong Zhu was really crying, so he did not dare to move. After waiting for a while and seeing that Hong Zhu had finally calmed down, he opened his mouth to ask. Blankly rubbing his head, Xiao Chen did his best to recall what had happened. Because he had been seriously injured during the clash with Elder Nangong, he had lost consciousness. Therefore, his memory had remained at that moment and had not changed. Xiao Chen had been unconscious ever since he had been rescued by Hong Zhu. He had no idea what had happened during that period of time. All he felt was that he had been dreaming for a very, very long time, but he could not remember the content of the dream. Little idiot, let me tell you the whole story. Hong Zhu raised his head and looked at the confused expression on Xiao Chen's face. He could not help but smile through his tears. Using a finger to poke Xiao Chen's head, he said, "It's like this. Previously, you were seriously injured by that old man Nangong. When I called out to you, you did not respond. After that, those disciples under his command wanted to kill all of us. Fortunately, this big sister is exceptionally intelligent and managed to command the flying sword in time to bring us away from the Burning Sky faction. Afterwards, we randomly bumped into this place." Hong Zhu did not get up, nor did she put on her clothes. Just like that, she tightly hugged Xiao Chen like a koala, and used a gentle and charming voice to narrate the thrilling events of the past few days in full detail. An old immortal whose entire body is glowing with white light? He can even extend my life? Why does it sound so unreal? I'm getting more and more confused. Xiao Chen rubbed his nose, stunned by the contents of Hongzhu's description. Little scoundrel, why don't you say that it's mainly because I helped you heal? If I hadn't directed my flying sword to steal your natural treasures and patiently decoct medicine for you to take, and you wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Hongzhu pouted and grumbled somewhat unhappily and shyly. When the originally battle-hardened Xiao Chen heard these words, his face blushed for some reason. He looked at Hongzhu awkwardly and sincerely said with gratitude, "This time I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for you I probably would have already, and I even caused you to lose your virginity in this kind of situation. I'm really sorry. You're crazy, what nonsense are you talking about?" Hongzhu rolled his eyes and scratched Xiao Chen's nose. In a bad mood he lectured, "We've already been husband and wife for a long time, is there a need to thank each other? Besides, Big Sister has always been yours and our relationship has only taken a step further. Is there still a need to say such distant and polite words?" Yes. Xiao Chen smiled embarrassedly as he thought to himself, "It was clearly you who asked for credit just now, but now you're criticizing me instead. Women are really strange creatures." However, this thought only flashed past Xiao Chen's mind. He was currently filled with gratitude towards Hongzhu, so even if Hongzhu cursed or teased him a few more times, Xiao Chen would not have any complaints. "Boy, don't just thank your little lover. If not for your master kindly reminding her, I'm afraid you would have really died this time." Xiao Chen was pondering how to persuade Hongzhu to come down from his body when a voice suddenly resounded in his spiritual sense. "Ah, what the hell? Elder Heaven Ancestor, so the old immortal white light that Hongzhu mentioned was you?" Hearing Elder Heaven Ancestor's words, Xiao Chen was instantly dumbfounded. He had originally thought that Hongzhu's luck was off the charts, and he had really coincidentally encountered a passing immortal who had lent him a helping hand. He did not expect that it was actually Elder Heaven Ancestor who had manifested himself. Of course it was me. Otherwise, who would be so bored as to run into this deep mountain forest to save an insignificant little fellow? Elder Heaven Ancestor snorted in dissatisfaction. Chapter 1455. I thought there were many great magical powers in the world of cultivators, and Hongzhu just happened to see it. Xiao Chen was a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic and asked, "But aren't you just a primordial spirit? How did Hongzhu see you?" "What's so difficult about that?" Elder Heaven Ancestor explained proudly, "With my strength I can naturally affect Hongzhu's brain waves and make her hallucinate." "I see," Xiao Chen answered, not really understanding. He guessed that Elder Heaven Ancestor might have used the method of possessing him to let Hongzhu see an illusion again. However, on second thought, Xiao Chen suddenly remembered something. He asked in a slightly dangerous tone, "By the way, Elder Heaven Ancestor, Hongzhu chose to offer her body to help me heal. Could it be your idea?" I didn't say that. Don't accuse me wrongly." Elder Heaven Ancestor hurriedly denied and said awkwardly, "I only told her that she needed a method of balancing yin and yang to help you resist the drug, but I definitely didn't ask her to make such a big sacrifice." "Are you serious? Did you hint to her?" Xiao Chen obviously didn't believe Elder Heaven Ancestor's words. "Alas, to be honest, I also felt a little guilty at that time because I really didn't think of a suitable method to balance yin and yang." Elder Heaven Ancestor sighed and said sincerely, "But you were in a critical state at that time and could die at any time. If I didn't come out, we would all be finished. So, although I didn't think of a perfect way to deal with it, I was forced to use this method and told her all the methods I could think of. So, when she saw that I was in so much pain and couldn't do anything, she chose to use her body to save me." Xiao Chen's mood was a little low, and he felt that he had wronged Hongzhu. The little girl did this because she really liked you. Elder Tian's tone also carried a trace of sorrow as he added, "Previously when you were about to lose your life, this girl cried so hard that she wanted to die. She even wanted to commit suicide by taking poison. Fortunately, I acted in time and saved her, so that the two of you wouldn't die in this wilderness." In truth, there was one more thing that Elder Tian did not say. If Hongzhu had not taken the poison, causing his consciousness to slacken and his soul to gradually dissipate, he would not have been able to take advantage of the situation and construct such a complete illusion. He would not have been able to successfully inject the information of the prescription and the method to obtain it into Hongzhu's sea of consciousness. After all, when he was fighting with Elder Nangong, Elder Heaven Ancestor had also suffered serious injuries, but because his soul recovered relatively quickly, his strength still hadn't recovered to its peak. Therefore, after Elder Tian helped Hongzhu detoxify his poison, replenished Xiao Chen's qi, and then constructed an illusion to explain the situation to Hongzhu, his primordial spirit also couldn't hold on any longer. He didn't even have the time to think of a suitable method to harmonize yin and yang before he fled in a sorry state. Otherwise, that illusion might really collapse on the spot, and all of his previous efforts would have been in vain. Fortunately, although Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't explain it in detail, Hongzhu was extremely intelligent, and without a teacher he thought of the most suitable method and finally saved Xiao Chen. Of course, Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't think it necessary to tell Xiao Chen about this. In any case, now that he had successfully awakened, everything was fine. What? Hongzhu wants to commit suicide for love. Xiao Chen was shocked, staring at Hongzhu, who was lying on top of him with infinite tenderness, and couldn't help but have a good impression of her. When he was unconscious, this little girl must have been in so much pain and sorrow that she would choose such an intense and resolute action. Thinking of his lukewarm attitude towards her in the past, Xiao Chen couldn't help feeling a little guilty, and gently stroked her hair. Yes, but that's no longer important. I've already erased that painful memory of hers, or rather I've hidden it, so she will only think that it was a dream and won't take it seriously. Elder Heaven Ancestor indifferently said, but in the future don't mention this matter in front of her, or else it'll be very easy to see through it. Alright, I'll remember that. Xiao Chen took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He changed the topic and asked, then are my injuries considered to be completely healed now? Don't tell me I need to rest for a few more days? Look at what you're saying, rest for a few more days, is there a need for that? You don't believe in the medicine that I prescribed for you? Elder Sky lectured him in exasperation. That's not what I meant. Xiao Chen wanted to explain a few more words but was interrupted by Elder Heaven Ancestor. After the yin and yang harmonization just now, coupled with the effect of the medicine, you've now reached the half-step mountain opening stage, which means that you're about to break through to the next stage of profound ascension stage, so hurry back to the Burning Sky sect, and find that Nangong something for revenge. Are you serious? Half-step mountain opening stage. Xiao Chen was dumbfounded once again. He subconsciously circulated his mental cultivation method to activate his vital qi. Only then did he realize that the many broken meridians in his body had all been repaired at some point in time. His vital qi had become denser and more solid, and the aura he emitted was also more oppressive than before. Husband Xiao Chen, you seem to have become stronger again. Feeling the oppressive aura emitted by Xiao Chen, Hongzhu blurted out in surprise, and unconsciously began to circulate his cultivation method. How did I also break through? As he circulated his cultivation method, Hongzhu suddenly discovered that he had also leveled up, and couldn't help but mutter in bewilderment, what's going on? I think I'm about to break through to the nascent soul stage. Just now we are equivalent to a higher level of dual cultivation, so not only have my injuries healed, my strength has also increased and yours has also soared. Xiao Chen smiled slightly and gave a simple explanation. Wow, so you can actually cultivate while exercising? That's amazing. Hongzhu blinked his eyes, his tone full of surprise and excitement, and his eyeballs rolled around, not knowing what he was thinking. That's right. Xiao Chen nodded, lightly pinched the tip of Hongzhu's nose and asked in a gentle voice, it's already been a few days, right? Why don't we first return to the Burning Sky faction, kill that arrogant Elder Nangong, and then I'll slowly help you level up. No way. Contrary to Xiao Chen's expectations, Hongzhu actually refused, and instead said coquettishly, there's still a while before the sun rises. Let's hurry up, we can do it again. Big sister wants to break through to the nascent soul stage right now. If you don't agree, I won't leave you. Chapter 1456. I'm going to cling on to you and not leave. After saying this, Hongzhu was afraid that Xiao Chen would not agree, so she wrapped her arms around his neck and tightly hugged him without letting go. She pouted and stared at Xiao Chen as if saying, I'm not going, what can you do to me? Seeing Hongzhu like this, Xiao Chen felt both amused and helpless. However, he also understood very well in his heart that it was precisely because he had been avoiding Hongzhu all this time that Hongzhu would be so anxious. Even though he had given his body to Xiao Qian, he still felt afraid and uncertain. Thinking up to here, Xiao Qian's heart was filled with tenderness and tenderness. He turned over and pressed Hongzhu under his body, lightly kissing her delicate red lips, blocking Hongzhu's cry of surprise. Then he said with a smile, "Now that you're my savior, of course I'll do whatever you say. I'll listen to everything you say." Hateful little scoundrel. Hongzhu coquettishly glanced at Xiao Qian, reached out to hold his shoulders and took the initiative to greet him. The cave was once again filled with a strong feeling of spring. The morning sun shone on the plaza of the Burning Sky sect. What should have been a clean and tidy plaza was now a mess of many things. There were bags piled here and there, and many disciples were sweating profusely as they bent over and counted something. Duan Suqing, the sect master of the Burning Sky sect, stood at the side of the plaza with a solemn expression. Gong Shaoxi, who also had a dark expression, was next to him. The two of them silently looked at the bags of heavenly treasures on the ground as the disciples inspected and recorded them one by one. According to the instructions given by Gong Ruitong, while dealing with the Profound Cloud sect, they had also secretly sent out many disciples to search for the whereabouts of Xiao Qian and Hongzhu. As a result, they had searched all the nearby mountains, but still hadn't found any traces of the two. Because the majority of the disciples had been sent by Duan Suqing to search for Xiao Qian and Hongzhu, their progress had been greatly delayed. The deadline given by Elder Nangong was approaching, but there was still a pile of heavenly treasures that hadn't been counted. In desperation, Duan Suqing could only spread the treasures on the square, and then called over all the disciples who were still in the sect, and let them check them one by one. "Sect Master Duan, isn't the efficiency of your Burning Heaven sect's disciples a little too low?" An impatient voice rang out from afar before the person arrived. Duan Suqing turned his head when he heard the voice, only to see Elder Nangong walking over with his subordinates from a short distance away. With a black face, he berated loudly, "It's just a piece of trash, yet you still haven't finished counting them for 5 whole days. Sect Master Duan, don't tell me you're trying to stall for time and wait for that Xiao Chang to come back and save you?" Due to the assistance of various medicinal pills, Elder Nangong's injuries had already completely healed, so he didn't want to stay in the Burning Heaven sect any longer. It was only because of the reason he had used before, which was to wait for these heavenly treasures to finish counting, that Elder Nangong had patiently waited for so many days. Elder Nangong, please don't misunderstand. I'm sure you've also seen that the number of these heavenly treasures is indeed very large. Furthermore, our Burning Heaven sect is already short on manpower, so it's really impossible for us to finish counting them in such a short period of time. Why don't I trouble you to wait for a few more days? Duan Suqing endured his anger and said with a smile. Actually, what Elder Nangong said wasn't wrong. Duan Suqing indeed wanted to stall for time. Perhaps after a few more days the disciples would be able to find Xiao Chang. Duan Suqing originally didn't have high expectations for Xiao Chang's survival, but Gong Ruidong had always insisted that Upper Immortal Zhao's divine quality was extraordinary, and that he definitely wouldn't die just like that. Furthermore, Gong Shaoxi also strongly supported his father's viewpoint, which was why Duan Suqing had spent so much effort to find the whereabouts of Xiao Chang and Hongzhu. Stop talking nonsense. You secretly sent out a large number of disciples just to find Xiao Chang, which is why you wasted so much time. Don't think that this old man really doesn't know. Elder Nangong laughed coldly and mercilessly exposed him. Misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Duan Suqing's sweat was about to drip down. He wanted to explain a few more words, but was interrupted by Elder Nangong with a wave of his hand. Alright, there's no need to count them. Duan Suqing was slightly stunned. He thought that Elder Nangong couldn't wait any longer, so he planned to give up these things and directly leave the Burning Heaven sect. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice in his heart. However, before he could rejoice for long, he heard Elder Nangong continue to say, "In any case, most of these heavenly treasures belong to the Profound Cloud sect. Also, hand over all the spirit crystals that you've hidden. This old man doesn't have the time to wait for you to dawdle. Give us all these things, we'll directly bring them back to the Profound Cloud sect and count them ourselves." Gong Shaoxi had already endured by the side for a long time. When he heard Elder Nangong being so overbearing, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. He couldn't help but point at Elder Nangong's nose and scolded, "You old thing, you're simply going too far. These things were clearly seized from the mountain bandits' lair by our people. Moreover, that place is very far from your Profound Cloud sect. How could the mountain bandits possibly run to your place to snatch it? Elder Nangong's eyes flashed. He was just worrying about not being able to find a suitable opportunity to establish his might, and now someone had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. He pretended to inadvertently tilt his head slightly and secretly gave a look to the disciple beside him. Gong Xiaoxi didn't notice and continued to loudly scold, "You're simply taking advantage of the profound cloud sect's power to forcefully embezzle our burning heaven sect's heavenly treasures. Shameless. Smelly shameless. Impudent. Little ant, you actually dare to be disrespectful to Elder Nangong, your F*** king looking for death." A profound cloud sect disciple received Elder Nangong's signal and immediately stared at Gong Xiaoxi and scolded. As soon as he finished speaking, the disciple's body shook and revealed the strength of a nascent soul stage cultivator. A faint yuan qi immediately appeared and wrapped around his arm. He jumped straight into the air and then took out a huge sword that was flashing with a green light. Without saying a word, he waved his arms and fiercely chopped down at Gong Xiaoxi. Gong Xiaoxi had never expected that while he was still talking, his opponent would suddenly attack. Moreover, it was a killing move. He had no time to react at all. Moreover, he was not strong enough. Even if he wanted to resist, he would only die in the end. Gong Xiaoxi, who was completely disheartened, clenched his teeth and solemnly closed his eyes, quietly waiting for death to come. Duan Suqing, who had wanted Gong Xiaoxi to shut up, was shocked to see this. Just as he was about to quickly open his mouth to plead for mercy, he suddenly felt a green light flash in front of him and heard a crisp "kacha" sound of bones breaking. Chapter 1457. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere and a trail of blood spilled on the ground. Duan Suqing watched helplessly as a round thing fell to the ground, and then rolled to his feet. "Humph, you overestimate yourself. This is the result of going against our profound cloud sect. Sect leader Duan, ask your men to prepare a carriage as soon as possible and pack it with heavenly treasures and spirit crystals. This old man is going to—" Elder Nangong arrogantly clasped his hands behind his back. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt that something was not quite right. Retracting his arrogant chin, Elder Nangong lowered his head to take a closer look. The round object on the ground seemed a little familiar. It seemed to be the head of one of his subordinates. "I'm still alive?" Gong Xiaoxi closed his eyes and waited for a long time but did not receive the sword qi. He could not help but open his eyes in astonishment. However, what he saw was no longer the scene from before. The ferocious fellow who had swung the huge sword at him had disappeared. In his place was the back of a youth who stood steadily in front of him. The youth's left hand was gripping the blade of the huge green sword while his right hand was hugging an enchanting woman. From the close distance between them, the two of them seemed to be very close. Gong Xiaoxi was stunned for a long time before he carefully walked forward. When he saw the faces of the two of them, he was so shocked that he almost jumped up and shouted, "Immortal Master! Master's wife! Why is it the two of you? Why aren't you dead yet? Ba ba ba. That's not right, you're still alive. Xiaochong. You're actually all right?" When Elder Nangong heard Gong Xiaoxi's voice, he raised his head in astonishment. His expression immediately changed and he could not help but blurt out. The two people standing not far away were Xiao Chong and his cultivation partner. Furthermore, the two of them looked very energetic, especially Xiao Chong. His face was rosy and he did not look like someone who had just been seriously injured. Hong Zhu ignored Elder Nangong and snappily glared at Gong Xiaoxi as he lectured, "You're no longer a child, yet you're still speaking so recklessly. Pay attention in the future, don't embarrass your master. I am master's wife, you really know how to talk. So I wasn't hallucinating." Gong Xiaoxi's shock turned to ecstasy and he shouted excitedly, "That's great. Master's wife, where have you been hiding these past few days? My father and junior brothers were worried to death. Fortunately, he firmly believed that you would be fine. Now that you've returned safe and sound, he will be happy to death. Exalted immortal Xiao, it's great that you're back." Duan Suqing's blabbermouth gave Gong Xiaoxi a headache. He quickly took 2 steps forward and explained, "After the Grand Elder learned that you were injured, he was very worried. That night he sent most of our disciples out to search for you. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything, so he was so worried that he couldn't eat or drink for several days. If he knew that you two had returned safely, he would be very happy." Originally, when Elder Nangong questioned him, Duan Suqing had wanted to hide it. Now that Xiao Chen had appeared, he decided to spill the beans. This angered Elder Nangong so much that his face darkened. "Oh, I went out for a trip and gave this Elder Nan some time to recover before killing him. Otherwise it would look like I'm bullying him." Xiao Qin nodded and gave Hongzhu a peck on the cheek, causing her to tremble with joy. Everyone present was stunned by her coquettish and bashful look. Although he said so, Xiao Qin thought to himself, if it weren't for Elder Heaven Ancestor and Hongzhu, let alone recovering, I might have died in that wilderness. "Ah, congratulations on your return from your trip, Immortal Xiao Chang." Duan Suqing complimented him with a smile. Suddenly he patted his head and said to himself, "Oh right. Look at my brain, I have to tell this good news to the Grand Elder as soon as possible." Duan Suqing, who came to his senses, quickly called over a disciple and instructed him to quickly report the situation to Gong Ruidong. Xiao Qin smiled faintly. He turned to look at Elder Nan, whose face was as black as coal, and said coldly, "Old bastard Nan Gong, it seems you didn't expect that I would come back to beat you, did you? I didn't expect you to have such a tough life." Elder Nan Gong frowned and said in a gloomy tone, "Last time, you fled in panic because of a woman. This old man was merciful and couldn't kill you with my own hands. Sure enough, I left behind a lot of trouble in the future." Looking up at the flying sword hovering in the air, Elder Nan Gong found that the sword was stained with a lot of blood. It was obvious that his disciple had been beheaded by this thing just now. Xiao Qin curled his lips and thought to himself, "Old bastard, you really know how to talk big. At that time you couldn't even protect yourself. If it weren't for that strange magic tool protecting you, who knows who would have fallen to the ground. Now you're really talking big." Glancing at the headless corpse on the ground, Elder Nan Gong's tone became even more unfriendly. "Today I was careless and you took advantage of it. I lost a beloved disciple for no reason. Since you're back, don't even think about escaping this time." "Oh, why do I feel that I should be the one saying this?" Xiao Qin yawned absent-mindedly and said very casually, "However, this exalted deity's mood right now is still not bad. If you are willing to immediately kneel and beg for mercy, then honestly tell me who ordered you to cause trouble at the Burning Sky sect. This exalted deity might even be merciful and spare your dog life." After he finished speaking, Xiao Qin kicked the corpse of the Xianyun sect disciple away with the tip of his foot. Then he crossed his arms in front of his chest and slowly took a few steps forward. A faint light flashed in his deep eyes as he raised his eyebrows at Elder Nan Gong. Seeing Xiao Qin like this, Elder Nan Gong couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He vaguely felt that this kid seemed to have changed into a different person. He had an indescribable aura. Thinking back to the last time he saw him, he didn't seem to have this kind of feeling. However, this thought only flashed in Elder Nan Gong's mind, and he didn't take it to heart. Seeing Xiao Qin's provocative posture, he looked up to the sky and laughed. With a face full of certainty he asked, "Xiao Chang, you must have thought that my injuries haven't healed after the last battle, so you're thinking of taking advantage of my weakness to take my life, right?" Xiao Qin blinked his eyes and before he could answer, he saw Elder Nan Gong's body suddenly tremble. He immediately revealed the cultivation of the peak profound ascension stage and laughed at him proudly. "How is it? You didn't expect me to have recovered, right? Are you surprised? Are you afraid? Ah." Chapter 1458. In fact, Elder Nangong was also a little puzzled. In his opinion, he had borrowed the power of the Xianyun sect. In addition to the protective magic artifacts, he also had many elixirs on him. It was normal for him to recover from his injuries by taking them in time and recuperating. Xiao Chang seemed to have recovered too? What was the excuse of going on a trip? Elder Nangong immediately concluded that this guy was definitely lying. This guy probably had a lot of top-notch elixirs on him and was just pretending. Looking at Elder Nangong as if he was a fool, Xiao Qin couldn't be bothered to talk to him. He instructed the two primordial spirits in his sea of consciousness, "Little Nethery and Little Demon, I'll leave the fools behind to you." After giving the order, Xiao Qin immediately used his movement technique and attacked Elder Nangong. He waved his right arm and punched his lower abdomen. Taking advantage of the momentum of Xiao Qian's charge, the fire of the underworld also came out of his body. It instantly split into two and attacked the two subordinates behind Elder Nangong from the left and right respectively. And Little Demon controlled the flying sword that was still stained with blood and flew down from the sky with a whoosh. The sword was surrounded by black mist and went straight for another Xianyun sect disciple. "You guys be careful. If you can't beat him, just stall for time. Don't force yourself." Elder Nangong regarded Xiao Chen's two magic tools with great importance. His eyes were fixed on Xiao Chen, but he gave a few instructions to the disciples behind him. Then he charged toward Xiao Chen. Although Elder Nangong's magic artifact had been shattered by Xiao Chen previously, he felt that even if he was unarmed, he would be able to kill Xiao Chen, who did not have a magic artifact. In the blink of an eye, Elder Nangong's feet stomped on the ground and he pushed his palm out to meet Xiao Chen's fist. Boom! When the fist and the palm collided, a loud sound rang out. A powerful shockwave instantly appeared and quickly spread out in all directions. When the two collided, Elder Nangong was slightly puzzled. It has only been a few days since we last met. Why does this brat's strength seem to have increased by quite a bit? However, before the Nangong elder could figure it out, he felt a surge of surging essence suddenly follow Xiao Chen's fist and ruthlessly charge out, striking his palm. Bang! A muffled thunder-like sound rang out. Elder Nangong's entire body was involuntarily sent flying by the shockwave. He smashed through a few trees at the side of the plaza before he lost his momentum and fell heavily to the ground. Elder Nangong's face was full of disbelief. He raised his head and glared at Xiao Chen. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt as if his internal organs were in turmoil. He only had time to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood before his vision went black and he fainted. The three disciples of the Shen Yun sect did not see the battle between Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong because they were focused on avoiding the joint attack of 9 underworld flames and in Xiaomao. Because these disciples often practiced joint attacks, they could barely resist for a while against 9 underworld flames and in Xiaomao. They followed Elder Nangong's teachings. Since they couldn't hold on, they would try their best to stall for time until someone reached out to help. However, after resisting for a while, the three disciples did not wait for Elder Nangong's help. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more difficult, the three of them took advantage of one of the gaps and looked in the direction of the battle between Elder Nangong and Xiao Chen. They were surprised to see Xiao Chen looking at them leisurely with his arms crossed in front of his chest and shaking his legs. The three of them were a little flustered. When they turned around, they saw Elder Nangong lying motionless behind a few broken tree trunks. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. There was also a large pool of blood on the ground. They were immediately shocked. There was a flaw in their joint attack. How could 9 underworld flames and in Xiaomao let go of such a great opportunity? The two of them immediately took advantage of the situation and hit the three disciples who were at a loss. One of them was directly pierced in the chest by in Xiaomao, and the other two were instantly burned to ashes by 9 underworld flames. Senior brother Wu Er, I heard that master came back safe and sound. Where is he now? The battle here had just come to an end. Gong Ruidong's urgent call suddenly came from a distance. It turned out that Gong Ruidong had just gotten the news from his disciple. He was so excited that he jumped up and immediately dragged his legs that had just recovered. He couldn't wait to rush to the scene as fast as he could. He looked around the square in a hurry, but he did not see Xiao Chen. Father, junior brother, master is fighting. Gong Xiaoxi pointed to a place not far away and said excitedly in a low voice, Before you came, master had already crippled Elder Nangong. Send him flying. His subordinates have also been eliminated by him. He is now preparing to interrogate them. You'd better not disturb him now. Let's talk about it later. Gong Ruidong quickly turned his head and saw Xiao Chen walking towards Elder Nangong with a smile. He was still holding a water ball in his hand. Okay, I will wait here. I am willing to wait as long as it takes. Gong Ruidong's face was full of joy. He nodded and promised. Xiao Chen didn't notice what Gong Xiaoxi was doing. Instead, he walked straight to Elder Nangong and waved his hands slightly. The water ball spell that was originally floating in the air poured onto Elder Nangong's head with a splash. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. Elder Nangong was still in a coma. He was directly awakened by the water. He lay on the ground and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Xiao Chen was too lazy to care about Elder Nangong's pretense. He kicked him hard and said with a sullen face, I just abolished your cultivation. Don't pretend to be dead in front of me. If you don't want to feel that feeling again, tell me quickly. Who sent you here? The skin on Elder Nangong's face became a little loose and old. He stared at Xiao Chen in a daze, his eyes filled with disbelief. He trembled as he asked, You're already an opening mountain expert? Xiao Chen smiled coldly and answered with a tacit agreement. Although his cultivation was only half a step away from the opening mountain stage, since this old thing was willing to believe so, there was no need for him to rush to deny it. He would let him be surprised for a while. How is this possible? Elder Nangong was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. He said with a face full of disbelief, "Previously you were seriously injured by me and basically lost your vitality. In just a few days not only did you successfully recover, but you also successfully broke through." Chapter 1459. Alright, don't talk about those useless things. Xiao Chen waved his hand and continued to ask, "Isn't your Yun Xian sect quite powerful? Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself by finding such a poor excuse to stand up for those mountain bandits? I'm in a good mood today. I'll give you two choices. Either tell me the person who instructed you or—" Xiao Chen didn't finish his words, but made a you-know expression, then he snapped his fingers. The underworld fire and in Xiaoma, who were originally wandering around those disciples, heard the signal and immediately approached. The former emitted a strange blue-purple flame, swaying in front of Elder Nangong, ready to burn him to ashes at any time. The latter didn't say a word and directly put the flying sword on Elder Nangong's neck. When the flying sword was put on the neck and Xiaoma, who was hidden in the flying sword, deliberately shook slightly, making a clear cut on Elder Nangong's throat, making him groan in pain. Elder Nangong struggled in his heart for a while. When he sensed Xiao Chen's rising killing intent, he knew that there was no way he could resolve this matter peacefully. All he could do was hang his head and explain in a low voice, "This old man, actually, I have never seen that person's true appearance. This is because we normally communicate through voice transmission talismans. I only know that his subordinates address him as the young master of a large faction. Your Yun Xian sect, which is ranked second in the immortal cultivation world, is actually a dog for other forces?" Xiao Chen sneered and said sarcastically, "I really didn't expect you to have such a hobby. No, this matter has nothing to do with Yun Xian sect. I brought my own disciple to help him." Elder Nangong quickly denied it this time and then explained, "Because the young master's father saved me back then, so I want to return the favor this time. So, young master's father? Then he is the old master of that force? What is his name? What does that force do?" Xiao Chen frowned. He was not used to Elder Nangong's tongue-twisting words. Elder Nangong's eyes flickered slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment before changing into a helpless expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, I only met the old head once. After he saved me we exchanged contact details. However, we never met again, so we don't have a particularly deep friendship." "Is that so? So you came to provoke him this time because you knew in your dream that his son was in trouble, so you took the initiative to help, right?" Xiao Chen's expression did not change, and he casually found a reason for Elder Nangong. No, we usually keep in contact through the sound transmission talisman." Hearing Xiao Chen's merciless mockery, Elder Nangong's sweat dripped down, and he added while trembling with fear, Even when I was ordered to stand up for that young master, I only went to his residence once, and simply chatted with his subordinates for a bit. After understanding the situation, I immediately brought people to Burning Heaven's sect." "Oh, if that's the case, then take us to his residence tomorrow." Xiao Chen brushed his sleeves and said indifferently, "I want to see what this strange young master really is." Elder Nangong's strange expression just now had already fallen into Xiao Chen's eyes. He knew that this guy was definitely not telling the truth, but he did not plan to pursue it too much. Right now he only had this one clue, so he could not force him too much. Before finding out the young master's true colors, Xiao Chen decided to temporarily let Elder Nangong live. Anyway, this guy was now a cripple and could not cause any big waves. "Guards, detain this good-for-nothing." Seeing that Xiao Chen had already finished interrogating him, Gong Ruidong and the others, who were standing not far away, immediately courteously welcomed him, and conveniently ordered the other disciples to take Elder Nangong away and imprison him. Arriving in front of Xiao Chen, Gong Ruidong first respectfully bowed, then revealed a happy smile and said, "Greetings, Lord Master. You don't know this, but ever since you disappeared, I, your disciple, have been unable to eat or sleep in peace for several days. Today, seeing that you and Master's wife are both fine, my heart can finally be at ease." Although Gong Ruidong had always firmly believed that Xiao Chen and the others were not dead, and had asked Duan Suqing to send people to the nearby mountains to search for traces of them, he still felt uneasy after not finding the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu for a day. Now that he saw the two of them alive and well, and that Xiao Chen's strength seemed to be even stronger than before, Gong Ruidong's heart finally fell to the ground. "Father, senior brother, I already told you, didn't I? Our senior immortal master looks like he will live for 100 years, How could he be so easily killed by bad guys? You are making a fuss about nothing. Gong Xiaoxi casually patted Gong Ruidong's shoulder and said. Gong Xiaoxi's proud look seemed to have completely forgotten that when he was panicking before, it was Gong Ruidong who stabilized the morale of the troops and pointed out the right path for him to calm down and arrange the follow-up work. Yes, son, you are right. It is all my fault for being too nervous. Gong Ruidong was in a good mood and did not intend to refute anything. Instead, he happily nodded his head and echoed. I say, the two of you are really… Xiao Qin frowned as he looked at the two of them, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he still shook his head and said, Forget it, this weird relationship always gives me a headache. Let's not talk about such nonsense and quickly prepare some hot food. I am about to die from hunger. Xiao Qin subconsciously rubbed his stomach. He had been unconscious during this period of time, and besides drinking a bowl of medicinal soup, he had not eaten a single grain of rice. When he had just woken up, he had been forced by Hongzhu to hand in his homework several times. Even though he had broken through to the half-step mountain opening realm, he had still almost collapsed from exhaustion. That's right, this master's wife is also so hungry that her chest is sticking to my back. Let's quickly go eat. Hongzhu also walked over at this moment, stretching her body as she said this charmingly. Originally, Hongzhu was a young girl who was both charming and pure, and now that she had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, her entire body exuded a kind of fatal attraction. Every movement of hers had a charm that made one unable to move their eyes away. Gong Xiaoxi was subconsciously attracted by Hongzhu and stared at her in a daze for a long time. Only when Gong Ruidong gave him a heavy kick did he return to his senses. It was not that Gong Xiaoxi had any improper thoughts towards his master's wife, but because of the mental cultivation method that Hongzhu cultivated, he could not help but be attracted to her. Gong Xiaoxi swallowed hard, then bowed with a smile and said, Great immortal master's wife, sect master Duan has already thought of this, so he has already ordered the disciples to start preparing. I believe that it should be about time now. Please come with me, I guarantee that you will all have your fill. Chapter 1460. After the matter was settled, the few of them swept away the haze in their hearts for the past few days. They chatted and laughed as they walked towards the kitchen, leaving a string of cheerful laughter in the Burning Sky faction. That night, Xiao Qin still stayed in the Burning Sky faction, patiently consolidating his cultivation that had just reached the half-step mountain opening stage. He originally wanted to continue working hard and break through to the first level of the mountain opening stage, but after repeated attempts he still couldn't find the way and could only helplessly choose to give up. In fact, the most important thing was not that Xiao Qin didn't know how to cultivate, but that Hongzhu was constantly harassing him, teasing him from time to time. Now that the two of them had broken through that layer of window paper, and their relationship had also taken a step further, Hongzhu also became even more unscrupulous. His words and actions made Xiao Qin's mind swayed, and his heart rippled incessantly. Since he couldn't make a breakthrough in a short time, Xiao Qin simply stopped cultivating. He hugged Hongzhu and rolled on the bed a few times, before the two of them hugged each other and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Xiao Qin and Hongzhu packed their luggage, and after a simple farewell to the group of people in the Burning Sky faction, they stepped onto their flying swords outside the sect. Under the gazes of Gong Xiaoxi, Duan Suqing, and the others, they carried Elder Nangong and left on their flying swords, flying towards the location of the mysterious young master. The few of them flew according to the direction pointed by Elder Nangong for about an hour, traversing over towering mountains and lofty ridges along the way, passing through large stretches of primordial forests, and occasionally hearing Elder Nangong's fearful cries along the way. Finally, before the sun rose, they arrived at the outskirts of a prosperous town. Hey, old man, don't make a ruckus. Don't you realize that your legs can already step on the ground? Hongzhu angrily kicked Elder Nangong, gritted his teeth and said hatefully, I couldn't tell that a dignified sect elder like you, who was once an expert at the peak of the profound ascension stage, would actually be afraid of taking a plane. You're too useless. Along the way Hongzhu's ears were almost deafened. Good heavens, an unprepossessing old man could continuously howl for an entire hour, and his voice wasn't hoarse at all. Could it be that he had practiced before? A bel canto singer? Miss Hongzhu, please don't joke with this old man. Elder Nangong's face was deathly pale, and his legs were trembling like a sieve. After persevering for a while, he finally couldn't stand it any longer. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground on his butt. Thinking back to the experience in the sky, he still felt a lingering fear. When was I joking with you? Hongzhu angrily glared at him and said with a huff, "What elder of the second largest sect? I think he's just an old man who's afraid of heights and gets airsick. How annoying." Elder Nangong's face was bitter. He trembled and said with a sobbing tone, Although I used to be in the mysterious ascension stage, I'm just an ordinary person now. If Immortal Shao accidentally let me fall from the sky, wouldn't I be smashed into pieces? That would be an ugly death. Why are you talking so much? Shao Qin impatiently grabbed Elder Nangong's collar and pointed to a nearby town. Where is that young master hiding? And what is this place? You better tell me the truth right now. Otherwise this immortal doesn't mind letting you fly again. But this time I can't guarantee that I won't be in the mood to catch you. Don't. I'll tell you right now. Elder Nangong's face changed. He hurriedly pointed to the town and said, Young master lives in one of the houses in Yaoxian County. This old man will bring you there right now. It was precisely because of these few confrontations that Elder Nangong was very clear that Xiao Chang was definitely a person who would do what he said. Therefore he didn't dare to delay or be negligent. He hurriedly forced himself to stand up straight and limped towards the town. Actually, after being detained in the prison yesterday, Elder Nangong originally wanted to use a sound-transmitting talisman to inform the young master in advance. However, he didn't expect that the Burning Sky sect disciple who detained him would actually search his body and confiscate all his valuables, including the entire bag of sound-transmitting talismans. Feeling helpless, Elder Nangong could only give up on this plan. Right now, he could only take one step at a time and hope that the young master could come up with a suitable and foolproof plan. Xiao Qin and Hongzhu looked at each other before holding hands and carefully following behind Elder Nangong. They maintained a distance that wasn't too far away from him. This way they wouldn't appear to be deliberate and would ensure that they would be able to capture this fellow in an instant. In order to prevent this old thing from playing any more tricks, Xiao Qin's mind was tense and he was ready to act at any time. Even if he discovered that something was wrong, he was confident that he would be able to escape with Hongzhu. However, what surprised Xiao Qin was that Elder Nangong's mood was extremely calm on the way into the city. He didn't make any strange movements and only walked in front of them obediently, as if he had truly accepted his fate. However, the calmer and quieter this fellow was, the stronger the strange feeling in Xiao Qin's heart became. After entering Yaoxian province, Xiao Qin pondered for a moment before quietly assigning Hongzhu a task. He told her to find an inn to stay in and that he would pick her up after he finished his business on his side. Although Hongzhu was somewhat unwilling, she also knew that her strength wasn't enough to help Xiao Qin and would instead be a burden to him. Thus, she didn't say anything and quickly found an inn that looked more proper to stay in. She then watched as Xiao Qin followed Elder Nangong further and further away, gradually disappearing without a trace. The moment Xiao Qin's group stepped through the gates of Yaoxian province, the young master was resting in his own courtyard. The young master crossed his legs and frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat solemn. Ever since he had contacted Elder Nangong, he had been trying to find other information about Xiao Qin. However, regardless of whether it was the information from Elder Shen or the information he found through other channels, there was nothing about Xiao Qin at all. The young master could not help but feel defeated by this situation. More importantly, he suddenly realized that Elder Nangong hadn't contacted him for several days. This was something that had never happened before. Deeply worried, the young master directly tried to contact Elder Nangong through a voice transmission glyph. However, there was no reply either. This time the young master's mood sank even further. According to his judgment of Xiao Qin and Elder Nangong, it was very likely that the unkillable Xiao Chang had returned to cause trouble for Elder Nangong and had successfully counterattacked. Chapter 1461. With that thought, the young master suddenly stood up and paced back and forth in the study room. With Xiao Qin's vengeful personality, could it be that Elder Nangong had already been killed? Just as the young master's thoughts were running wild, someone suddenly knocked on the door and walked in without permission. The young master turned around and saw that it was Elder Shen who was in a hurry. He did not wait for the young master to speak and immediately cupped his hands. With an uneasy expression, he reported, "Young master, according to our spies in the prefecture, Elder Nangong is on his way here. There is also a young man following him not too far away. According to our informant, The relationship between these two people is not ordinary. You really came? The young master stopped and muttered hatefully, "This old fart is really unreliable. He just has to emphasize how powerful he is. I knew that Xiao Qian would not be so easy to deal with." "Young master, then what should we do now?" Seeing the young master's expression change continuously, Elder Shin could not hold it in and asked. After a moment of silence, the young master raised his head and ordered, "Immediately inform everyone in our residence to destroy all relevant evidence. Do not leave any traces, then retreat from the secret passage." "Understood, I will do it now." Although Elder Shin did not know the young master's reason for doing this, he still nodded decisively and accepted the order. Just as he took a few steps towards the door, Elder Shin suddenly thought of something and turned around to ask, "Young master, that little girl with the surname Cheng is currently in the prison cell in the garden of the residence. How do you think we should deal with her? Should I just kill her or bring her here?" His fingers rhythmically tapped on the table a few times. As if he had made a decision, the young master solemnly ordered, "You don't have to worry about that little girl. I will personally arrange her whereabouts. Now you should go and deal with other matters first. Once everyone in the residence has safely evacuated, find me at the entrance of the secret passage. Then we will make the next plan." Although he did not know what the young master wanted to do with that little girl, Elder Shin did not dare to ask too much. He immediately responded and left to start arranging the evacuation of everyone in the residence. The house that was originally peaceful suddenly began to boil. Everyone began to move. Some were busy destroying things, some were hurriedly packing up, and some were running around like headless flies. For a moment, the whole yard was in chaos and people were in a complete mess. Meanwhile, the young master stood at the door of the study and calmly glanced at it. Then he silently left the study and walked towards a secluded path. In the gloomy cell, Cheng Menjing lowered her head and sat there gloomily. Her body was tightly bound by a rope that was filled with strange symbols and looked like a dumpling. When Cheng Menjing had just been tied up by Elder Shin, she had tried to break free, but every time she tried to use her essence energy to break the ropes, the symbols on the ropes would emit a faint golden light, directly dispersing the essence energy that she had gathered in her body, and then it would return to silence. After trying a few times, Cheng Menjing finally understood that the rope that was tied up on her body was not ordinary. It could use the strange symbols on it to suppress the essence energy of the person being tied up. Furthermore, with her fiery eyes, she had never failed before. Needless to say, Cheng Menjing could guess that this was definitely the young master's bad idea. However, there was nothing she could do about this rope. She could only helplessly give up on the idea of escaping. Fortunately, other than being tied up and unable to move, there was a specialized servant girl to take care of everything else, so there was no inconvenience. Creak. The sound of rusty metal scraping against each other could be heard. The metal door of the cell was opened by someone. Cheng Menjing, who was in a daze, looked up when she heard the sound. When she realized that the person who came was the young master, she couldn't help but glare at him hatefully. Then, she angrily turned her head away and put on an indifferent expression. "Miss Cheng, you're living comfortably here. Every day there are servants to serve you. Your days must be pretty good, right?" The young master stood in front of Cheng Menjing and smiled sinisterly. "Whether it's comfortable or not, won't you know after a few days? Why are you asking me?" Cheng Menjing snorted coldly and retorted mercilessly. The young master's expression turned ugly after being rebutted by Cheng Menjing. He simply bent over and picked up the rope that was tied around Cheng Menjing's body. He pulled her up and was about to drag her out of the door. He didn't forget to say viciously, "I thought that you were probably tired of this place, so I specially found a new place for you out of goodwill. Come with me." "I don't want to." "Where are you taking me?" Cheng Menjing was shocked. She couldn't help but be dragged out by the young master. She stumbled a few steps before she remembered to struggle with all her might. "Let's go to a place first. I'll let you see some good things. Then I'll bring you to a new cell to settle you down. Don't worry, the new place won't be worse than this fake mountain." The young master turned around and bared his teeth at Cheng Menjing. He looked extremely terrifying. "I'm not going. Let go of me." Cheng Menjing struggled with all her might, but it was to no avail. She was still dragged out step by the young master. Cheng Menjing was anxious and angry. She originally thought that when she was imprisoned, Xiao Qian would coincidentally find this place and rescue her. She didn't expect that after waiting for a few days, there would still be no trace of him. She couldn't help but curse the young master in her heart. Alright, this matter isn't up to you. You'd better follow me obediently. The young master increased his strength and dragged Cheng Menjing out of the cell without any explanation. They passed through the corridor and out of the fake mountain. Cheng Menjing originally thought that the young master would take her outside the house. She didn't expect that they would just circle around the fake mountain and arrive at the side of another secret door. The young master looked around vigilantly. After confirming that there was no one around, he pushed open the secret door and entered the dimly lit secret passage. Then he closed the secret door casually. From the outside, not a single trace could be seen. The two of them walked deeper into the secret passage. Cheng Menjing looked left and right at the secret passage. She realized that the surroundings were rather rough, but there were many signs of use. Moreover, the entire secret passage was very deep. Even after walking for a long time, they still couldn't reach the end. The young master silently led Cheng Menjing forward until she felt that they had long left the house. When she didn't know where she was, the young master stopped at a fork in the road. Chapter 1462. Cheng Menjing looked around and found that this fork was connected to several doors in different directions. Some of them seemed to be secret rooms, while others seemed to be exits or entrances. From time to time, someone would come in from one of the openings holding bits and pieces of things in their hands. Then, they would hurriedly head in another direction and disappear at the end of the secret passage in the blink of an eye. There seemed to be several magic arrays set up in the entire secret passage. For example, as long as someone entered or left the door would light up with a silver-white light. It looked like a small magic array, but it was unknown what it was used for. When the people dressed in servants' clothes passed by the young master and Cheng Menjing, they seemed to completely ignore the young mistress who was tied up. Instead, they bowed respectfully to the young master, then turned around and left in a hurry. The young master stood at the fork for a while, seemingly observing the situation of the people coming and going. Then he walked towards a door and pushed it open with Cheng Menjing. They walked into a secret room. After Cheng Menjing walked into the secret room, she still looked back at the slowly closing door. She mainly stared at the light on the door, wanting to see what the magic array looked like. However, because the light was too bright, she couldn't see it clearly. It seems that you are quite interested in this magic array? The young master noticed Cheng Menjing's abnormality, but he didn't stop her. Instead, he said with a proud look, "Humph, what's there to be interested in?" Cheng Menjing was caught red-handed. She snorted uncomfortably and said, "Isn't it just a magic array for illumination? It's flashy but useless." "That's where you're wrong." The young master raised his eyebrows and pointed at the magic array on the secret door. "This magic array isn't used for illumination. It's used to detect the situation and prevent enemies from invading." Cheng Menjing looked at the faintly glowing magic array in astonishment. She couldn't figure out how such a small magic array could prevent enemies from invading. "Since you are also a high-level immortal cultivator, you must have released your divine senses to investigate the surroundings, right?" The young master seemed to have become addicted to being an explanation. He explained in a clear and logical manner, "Once a cultivator's divine sense comes into contact with this kind of formation, it will automatically activate and set up all kinds of targeted illusions to deceive the opponent, making them see the wrong illusion. Even if your servant Xiao Chen came here, he would still be trapped by this formation." "You make it sound like it's real." Cheng Menjing pursed her lips. She didn't really believe the young master's introduction. Xiao Chen won't be deceived by such a low-level smokescreen. "You're just wasting your time." Although she said that, Cheng Menjing didn't have much confidence in her heart. Firstly, she didn't know if Xiao Chen would be able to rush over to save her. Secondly, after this period of immersion in the immortal cultivation world, she also knew that there were many strange things in the immortal cultivation world. She didn't know if Xiao Chen could easily see through this kind of magic array. "Haha, Miss Cheng, you're too naive, aren't you?" The young master looked up to the sky and laughed a few times. He walked to a corner of the room that had a magic array drawn on it. He stretched out his hand and pulled on the rope, dragging Cheng Menjing in. He said with a proud expression, "Let the truth tell you the truth." After saying that, the young master started to circulate his mental cultivation and revealed his golden core stage level 5 cultivation. Then he started to silently chant a strange incantation. When Cheng Menjing felt the young master's strength, she was a little annoyed. If she wasn't tied up by this strange rope, dealing with this guy would be a piece of cake. The young master didn't know what Cheng Menjing was thinking. He continued to chant the incantation step by step. The magic array on the ground immediately emitted a soft white light. The white light was projected onto the wall in front of the two of them, reflecting the image of the front door of a house. Cheng Menjing focused her eyes and realized that the house was no different from the house that she had been caught in. However, there was a huge sign hanging on the door. Moreover, there was no content on the sign. It was blank and looked very strange. Why does it look like a surveillance camera? Cheng Menjing muttered silently. Although she was usually careless and didn't understand the abilities of cultivators very well, she still remembered that Xiao Chen had mentioned that some magic arrays seemed to have the effect of surveillance. That's right. This is a surveillance array. Just watch patiently. There will be a good show to watch later. The young master nodded his head proudly and directly admitted it. Cheng Menjing was a little puzzled. Looking at the young master's confident look, could it be that Xiao Chen had really come? Sure enough, not long after, the image on the wall reflected the figures of Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong. When Cheng Menjing saw the familiar figure that she hadn't seen for a long time, her eyes instantly turned red. There was an indescribable emotion in her heart. In the past, the two of them often spent time together, so Cheng Menjing didn't feel anything. After a period of separation, she realized that she actually had a strong dependence on Xiao Chen. Especially after entering the world of cultivation, so many people were missing. Even if she wanted to find them, she couldn't. She often woke up in fear at night, worried that something bad had happened to the others. At this moment, seeing that Xiao Chen appeared safe and sound, Cheng Menjing couldn't be more happy. Did he know that she was locked up here by the bad guys, so he specially came to save her? The surveillance image on the wall was still playing. She saw Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong enter the house one after another. Elder Nangong seemed to be familiar with the layout of the house. He turned around and said something to Xiao Chen, then led the way to the room where the young master was. From the image, Xiao Chen seemed to be more cautious. He followed behind Elder Nangong carefully and looked around from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Although his steps were very slow, he gradually left the range of the surveillance image. Did you see that? My servant has come to save me. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and let me go. Cheng Menjing took a deep breath to calm her emotions, then shouted at the young master. The young master acted as if he didn't hear Cheng Menjing's words. He directly walked to another array and chanted an incantation. Then another image appeared on the wall. It seemed to be the path to the main room of the house. Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong were walking in step by step. Apart from them, there was no one else on the image. The whole house looked very cold and deserted. Did you hear what I said? Cheng Menjing put on a fierce look and threatened the young master. If you serve me well, I might consider pleading on your behalf. Otherwise, I'll let my servant Xiao Chen send you flying. He's not like me, he has such a good temper. Chapter 1463. Oh, I'm so scared. The young master stared at the image without turning his head. He did not forget to mock. Wait until your Xiao Chen can find our secret passage first. Even if he can enter the secret passage, those illusion arrays are enough to make him lose his mind. In the image, Elder Nangong and Xiao Chen had already walked to the outside of a large room. Elder Nangong went up and knocked on the door respectfully. Xiao Chen directly struck out with his palm and smashed the door to pieces. Then he rushed in. Seeing Xiao Chen recklessly destroying his own courtyard, the young master's face was a little ugly. He quickly walked to another array and projected the scene inside the room onto the wall. He saw Xiao Chen walking back and forth, carefully inspecting the empty room. Elder Nangong stood at the side with a pale face. He also looked around in confusion, as if wondering why this place had suddenly become empty. Xiao Chen. I'm in the secret passage behind the fake mountain in the back garden. Hurry up and save me. Cheng Menjing took advantage of the young master's inattention to take a deep breath and shouted at the wall with her loudest voice. The entire secret room was shaken by Cheng Menjing's voice. The echo lingered in the air for a long time. Oh damn, I didn't know you were so young, but you have such a loud voice. The young master rubbed his ears and rolled his eyes at Cheng Menjing. He said casually, but this trick is useless. Don't waste your energy. The entire secret passage has a layer that isolates divine sense and sound. Even if you shout yourself hoarse, he won't be able to hear you. Just as the young master said, although Cheng Menjing's voice was loud, Xiao Chen on the screen did not notice it at all. He continued to search the room. Xiao Chen. I'm here. I'm in the back garden. Hurry up and come over. Cheng Menjing was a little unwilling to give up. She wanted to try a few more times, so she shouted at the wall. "Alright, stop shouting. I don't mind telling you that the secret room we are in is no longer behind the fake mountain in the garden. Also, the courtyard that Xiaoqin went to is not the same courtyard that you were locked in. So it's useless for you to shout. Give up." The young master waved his hand impatiently. When Qing Minjing heard what the young master said, she immediately felt a little discouraged. She glared at Xiaoqin, who was still looking left and right in the room, and muttered, "Stupid Xiaoqin, you're so stupid. You can't even find me like this. You might as well just blow up the entire floor. Maybe it'll have some effect." It was unknown if Qing Minjing's words were effective or if Xiaoqin suddenly found some clues, but he suddenly turned around and quickly walked out of the room. Soon he disappeared from the surveillance screen. Creak. The moment Xiaoqin's figure disappeared, the secret door of the young master's secret room suddenly opened. The sound of the iron door turning could be heard. The young master, who had his back to the iron door, jumped in fright. He thought that Xiaoqin had really been called over by Qing Minjing. He couldn't help but shiver. He suddenly turned around and put on a defensive posture. Qing Minjing also thought that Xiaoqin had come. She turned around happily, but she saw Elder Shin walking in with some documents. The excited expression on her face immediately collapsed. Young master, everyone has been evacuated. All the useless documents have been destroyed. There are no clues left. What should we do next?" Elder Shin looked at the two people with different expressions. He didn't understand what was going on, but he didn't dare to ask in detail. Instead, he reported in a serious manner. Cough, cough. When the young master saw that the person who came was Elder Shin, he withdrew his defensive posture awkwardly. He cleared his throat and pretended to be nonchalant as he instructed, "Oh, what did you say just now? Everyone has been evacuated, right? Then let's go. Since Xiaoqin likes this place so much, let him slowly play by himself." After saying that, the young master pulled the rope in his hand and dragged Qing Minjing out of the door. The immortal binding rope, in his hand, was a magic tool that could suppress a cultivator's essence qi. Although it couldn't hurt people directly, it could disperse all the essence qi that the person who was tied up had mobilized. Therefore, even though Qing Minjing had the cultivation of the original soul stage, she was no different from an ordinary person after being tied up. The young master didn't have to worry about her suddenly launching a sneak attack or escaping. Qing Minjing was dragged out by the young master and couldn't help but walk out. She tried her best to turn around and looked at the images on the wall in despair. She realized that Xiaoqin had already returned to the front yard and was inspecting everywhere. She couldn't help but shout with all her might, "Xiaoqin! Xiaoqin! I'm here. Can you hear me? Come and save me." Unfortunately, Xiaoqin was still completely unaware. He frowned and looked around the yard. Meanwhile, Qing Minjing had already been brought out of the secret room by the young master. Her shouts also became softer and softer until they gradually disappeared into the distance. "This place, why is it so strange?" Xiaoqin stood in the middle of the house and muttered to himself. He didn't know why he felt an indescribable sense of irritation in his heart. Just now, he had already used his divine sense to search all the rooms in the house. He had also personally checked all the suspicious places, but he didn't find any clues. Apart from being a little puzzled, Xiaoqin also felt an indescribable sense of anxiety. It was as if a small claw was constantly scratching his heart, but he didn't know where this feeling came from. Xiaoqin could sense that there should have been a stranger's aura in this house a few minutes ago. But why was there no one after he entered? Suddenly they all disappeared. Could it be that someone had informed him in advance? But ever since he entered the city, he had been staring closely at Elder Nangong. He didn't see him make any movements to send out any messages. Isn't this too strange? Could it be that the other party's spies have already spread all over the town? Elder Nangong stood behind Xiaoqin in confusion. He originally thought that when he brought Xiaoqin to visit suddenly, the young master would definitely be caught red-handed in the room. He didn't expect to find nothing. So now, Elder Nangong felt a little guilty. He silently stood on the spot and didn't dare to make a sound. He was afraid that if Xiaoqin couldn't find him, he would take revenge on him. Now that he was powerless, he didn't even have a chance to resist. "Why have you been standing here like a fool?" Sure enough, as Elder Nangong expected, after looking around, Xiaoqin couldn't help but sink his face. He stretched out his leg and kicked Elder Nangong's leg. He said angrily, "Is there any secret passage here? Or does that guy have other hiding places? Hurry up and bring me there, don't waste time here." Chapter 1464. I'm not sure about this either. Elder Nangong's face was bitter as he explained helplessly, this is only the second time I've come here. In all fairness, even if it was you, you wouldn't casually tell your family's secret passage to an outsider, right? After all, I'm just here to help. They don't have to show me their family's wealth. Elder Nangong didn't lie about this. In his opinion, the immortal cultivation world was a place where strength was important. Only strength was the standard to measure a person's value. Therefore, Elder Nangong was usually busy with cultivation or in seclusion in the sect. He had no time to care about other things. This time, if it wasn't because the great leader had found him and asked him to help with this matter, and he owed him a big favor, Elder Nangong wouldn't have specially come out of the sect. He didn't expect that he would suffer such a big setback because of Xiao Qin. After leaving the sect with the disciples, Elder Nangong followed the great leader's order and came here once. Therefore, he only knew that this place was the young leader's headquarters. After accepting the task here, he went straight to the Burning Sky faction. As for the other situation in this place, he was really ignorant and didn't know anything. Seeing that he couldn't squeeze any information out of Elder Nangong, Xiao Qin's anxiety didn't decrease. Instead, it became more intense. However, there was nothing he could do. The anxious Xiao Qin simply carried Elder Nangong and walked to the gate of the house. Then, he stared at the empty sign and ordered in his sea of consciousness, "Little Nethery, burn this house for me. Don't let it affect other places." Yes. The flame of the underworld appeared in Xiao Qin's palm with a whoosh sound. Then, it leaped into the air and instantly split into a dozen bluish-purple flames. They circled above the house for a while and then fell down like rain. In an instant, all the houses and buildings in this house were ignited. Although Xiao Qin had purposely instructed the fire of the underworld not to burn other buildings, there were still quite a few houses near this house. Moreover, most of them seemed to be empty because even until the entire house was burnt to ashes, no one came out to take a look, or ran over to extinguish the fire. After the fire of the underworld completed its task and returned to Xiao Qin's body, Xiao Qin stared at Elder Nangong and pondered for a while. He raised his hands slightly and used his divine sense to quietly place a divine sense imprint on him. In just a breath's time, Xiao Qin was done. He looked at the Nangong elder, who did not notice anything, and instructed indifferently, "Forget it. Just by looking at you, I can tell that you are a simple-minded fool. There is no point in keeping you around. Before I change my mind, quickly scram." "What did you say? I can really go now? You're not kidding, are you?" Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Elder Nangong suddenly froze and asked stutteringly. Elder Nangong had always thought that Xiao Qin would vent his anger on him for not being able to find the person. He did not expect that Xiao Qin would let him go so easily. For a moment he was at a loss. "Nonsense, you still don't want to go, right? Why, do you want this immortal to send you off with my flying sword?" Xiao Qin directly took out his flying sword and looked at Elder Nangong coldly. He said impatiently, No need. I can go by myself, I appreciate the immortal's kindness. I'll take my leave now, take my leave." Elder Nangong trembled in fear and did not dare to ask anything more. He immediately turned around and fled for his life. In the process of fleeing, Elder Nangong would occasionally glance behind him from the corner of his eyes, afraid that Xiao Qin would suddenly change his mind and give him another slap. Only after he had fled for a long distance and saw that Xiao Qin still did not make any move, Elder Nangong finally relaxed and hurriedly ran in the direction of his own sect. Xiao Qin stared at Elder Nangong's back without moving. His expression was calm and he did not seem to have any strange thoughts. He had already thought about it. Although this old man did not know anything, he could still be considered as a bait. If that so-called young master knew that Elder Nangong was still alive, it was very likely that he would take the initiative to find Elder Nangong to understand the situation. If he could use Elder Nangong to catch this big fish, it would be much more convenient than blindly searching for the other party. Therefore, Xiao Qin naturally would not choose to kill Elder Nangong. Instead, he placed a spiritual sense imprint on his body and allowed him to leave on his own. After Elder Nangong had completely disappeared, Xiao Qin turned around and left the ruined residence, returning to the inn where Hongzhu was staying. After entering the inn, Xiao Qin did not immediately go to his room to meet up with Hongzhu. Instead, he stood at the counter and called for a waiter. "Good day, sir. What can I do for you?" The waiter immediately ran over and asked with a face full of smiles. Xiao Qin casually took out a few spirit crystals that he had brought from Burning Heaven faction and stuffed them into the waiter's hands. He then casually said in a seemingly unintentional manner, It's nothing big, I just have a few questions that I would like to ask you. Oh sir, you are too polite. The waiter's eyes immediately lit up when he saw the spirit crystals. He hastily received them and stuffed them into his bosom. The smile on his face became even more sincere as he said, "Please do not hesitate to ask. As long as this waiter knows, I will definitely tell you everything I know." Xiaoqun nodded slightly and asked, "I would like to ask, have any strangers appeared in your town recently?" Strangers. The waiter carefully recalled for a moment before he slapped his thigh and said, "Yes, yes. A few hours ago an unfamiliar beauty just happened to stay in our inn. That girl was very beautiful and she looked unfamiliar. I don't think she has been here before." "A few hours ago?" Xiaoqun was stunned. "Wasn't that Hongzhu?" He could only wave his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry as he said, "That girl was with me. What I am asking is, have there been any strangers who have been here in the past 1 or 2 months?" "In the past 1 or 2 months?" The waiter blinked his eyes and frowned in deep thought for a while. Finally, he shook his head and said, "There don't seem to be any strangers who have appeared in our town during that period of time. The one who looked the most unfamiliar should be you. Is that so?" Xiaoqun fell into a somewhat regretful silence for a while before he continued to ask, "Then do you know if there are any relatively powerful forces or clans in your vicinity?" "Oh, there are." "Sir, are you looking for information or are you looking for someone?" The waiter's spirit was roused. He immediately nodded his head heavily and said, "The most famous place in our town is the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce's headquarters in Fallen Leaf Town in the east. I was fortunate enough to go there once before. The place is huge and it's really imposing. There's Chapter 1465. Xiaoqun saw that the waiter wanted to say a few more words, so he quickly interrupted him and said in a bad mood, "Stop, stop, stop. I'm not talking about the surrounding towns. I just want to ask if there are any big powers in your county. Why are you talking about such nonsense?" "You're talking about our Yaoxian county?" The waiter scratched his head and thought for a while before replying, "I really don't know what big powers there are in our county. However, there is a town called Floating Spirit Town not far from Yaoxian County. There is a sect called the Profound Cloud Sect in that town. It is known as the second largest sect in the cultivation world and is also one of the best. Other than that, there really isn't anything else." After listening to the waiter's introduction, Xiaoqun slowly knocked on the counter. He felt very strange. The headquarters of the young master seemed to be quite big, and with that kind of scale he reckoned that there were a lot of people inside. How could the people here not know about it? "Sir, do you have any other questions? If not, I'll go back to work." The waiter saw that Xiaoqun didn't speak for a long time, so he asked tentatively. Xiaoqun thought again and asked, "Then, in your county or in the surrounding towns, are there robbers or bandits? For example, when a wealthy businessman was about to go out to do business, did he get kidnapped on the way?" "Sir, are you joking?" When the waiter heard this question, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He stared at Xiaoqun as if he was looking at an idiot. "What's wrong?" Xiaoqun saw the waiter's expression and was a bit confused. Did he ask something wrong? The waiter sighed helplessly and explained, "The headquarters of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce is in the east of Yaoxian County, Falling Leaves Town. On the other side is the Floating Spirit Town where the Profound Cloud Sect is located. With 2 big powers in charge, who would dare to openly cause trouble here? Unless they're really tired of living." "Strange, this is really strange." Xiaoqun muttered to himself in confusion. The headquarters of these bandits is located next to the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. This is equivalent to guarding a big treasure. For them to be able to refrain from causing trouble and instead run to a place hundreds of miles away to rob, this doesn't seem to make sense. "Sir, what did you say? What headquarters?" The waiter looked at Xiaoqun in confusion. Xiaoqun waved his hand at him, then turned around and walked towards Hongzhu's room while muttering in a low voice, "According to Elder Nangong, even if the bandit headquarters and the Profound Cloud Sect don't have any friendly relations, they shouldn't be enemies. Since they aren't being threatened by enemies from both sides, and the size of their headquarters seems to be quite large, they shouldn't be afraid of that Chamber of Commerce. Is there any other reason?" The waiter shook his head as he watched Xiaoqun walk away, muttering to himself. He thought that this person was probably an idiot. He took out the spirit crystal and checked it again. When he found that it had not been swapped, he did not pursue the matter further. He turned around and went back to his own business. After Xiaoqun entered the room, he briefly chatted with Hongzhu and explained the situation to him. After that, he began to use his divine sense to observe Elder Nangong's movements. Sure enough, that guy was doing something different. It turned out that Elder Nangong was not on his way to the Profound Cloud sect. Instead, he had returned to the burnt bandit headquarters and was standing near the original main entrance. Elder Nangong felt somewhat baffled when he saw the ashes and charcoal strewn all over the ground. The last time he was here, there were many people going in and out of this place and it had seemed very lively. But in the blink of an eye, it had become a pile of rubble. He had no idea where the young master and the others had hidden themselves. After wandering around the ruins of the residence, Elder Nangong did not discover anything and could only dejectedly turn around and leave, once again walking in the direction of Floating Spirit Town. What the hell, you're messing with me? Xiao Qin had observed Elder Nangong's movements from the formation just now. He thought that the elder had come back to deliver a message, so he was about to summon his flying sword and rush over. The moment he stepped onto the flying sword, he realized that the old man had left angrily again. He could not help but curse. After waiting for a while, Xiao Qin saw that Elder Nangong was really heading towards Floating Spirit Town and did not cause any more trouble. Feeling somewhat depressed, he could only helplessly withdraw his flying sword and stay in the room to chat with Hongzhu, intending to wait for the bandits to take the initiative to contact Elder Nangong. In a town not far from the north of Yaoxian County, two young girls with outstanding looks were strolling side by side on the street aimlessly. One of the girls had handsome facial features and exuded a spiritual aura. Although she was wearing the clothes of a Taoist nun, she did not appear old-fashioned. Instead, she had a valiant and heroic air about her, looking like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. As for the other girl, although she was also quite beautiful, her face was extremely pale, without the slightest trace of blood. Her eyes also appeared somewhat hollow, and the weather was clearly clear, but she was holding a strangely shaped umbrella. If someone were to pay attention, they would discover that her walking posture was also quite awkward and stiff. Fortunately, her long white dress concealed her strange posture, so it was not obvious. Goo. As the two were strolling, a strange sound suddenly came from the stomach of the fairy-like girl. Immediately after, her pretty face blushed and she pretended to look around as if nothing had happened. Only when she discovered that no one seemed to be looking in their direction did she relax. The umbrella-holding girl was slightly taken aback when she heard this sound. She took out a few apples and pears from her bosom and softly said in a cold but pleasant voice, "Big Sister Xian, are you hungry? I still have some fruits that I gathered from the mountains, why don't you eat them first? I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a place to work and earn money so quickly." "Don't worry, I'll just eat an apple. You can keep the rest for yourself." Xianer embarrassedly smiled and reached out for an apple. She casually wiped it on her Taoist robe and impatiently took a bite, chewing a few times with force. The umbrella-holding girl did not insist. Seeing that Xianer only took an apple, she took the other fruits back. Seeing this scene, Xianer turned her head in surprise and asked, "Xiaoyu, why aren't you eating? There's nothing else on that mountain, but there's a lot of fruits. It's probably enough for us to eat for a few years. You don't have to be so frugal, there's no need for that." "But, Big Sister Xian, I'm a cultivator. To put it bluntly, I'm a living dead, so I don't need to eat to maintain my life." The umbrella-holding girl called Xiaoyu smiled helplessly and slowly walked forward with her head down. With a slightly bitter tone she said, "Also, I've tried eating before, but no matter what I eat, I can't taste anything. I don't usually feel hungry either, so I'll leave the fruits for you." Chapter 1466. "I'm sorry, I forgot about it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it." Xian rubbed her nose awkwardly and scolded herself for touching a sore spot. He was already upset that he had been turned into a cultivator for no reason. Why did she have to expose his shortcomings? Why was her brain so bad? "It's okay. Sister Xian, don't take it to heart. Xiaoyu didn't mind too much." She smiled and waved at Xian. Her gaze accidentally landed on a signboard on the side of the street. She immediately became spirited. She pulled Xian over and pointed at the signboard. "Sister Xian, look." "What's that?" Xian was eating an apple. When she heard that, she turned around. Her mouth was still stuffed with apple meat. She asked in a muffled voice, "It looks like a cultivator's chamber of commerce." Xiaoyu looked at it carefully and said excitedly, "It looks new. Let's go in and try our luck. Maybe we can find a suitable job." "Data Cultivator's Chamber of Commerce?" What kind of stupid name is that? Xian took a few more bites of the apple and threw away the core. She walked to the door of the Chamber of Commerce and looked inside for a while. After a round of observation, Xian found that there were quite a lot of people in the Chamber of Commerce. The decoration looked quite luxurious, unlike those fake companies in the secular world. After thinking for a while, she nodded and said, "Okay. Since there's nothing else to do now, let's go and take a look." After making the decision, the two women quickly walked into the Chamber of Commerce. Xiaoyu was still holding an umbrella, which was particularly eye-catching in the room. In fact, these two girls were Li Xian'er and Ye Xiaoyu, who were teleported from the inner martial arts world. For some reason, they were teleported to a barren mountain and quickly gathered together. At first, the two women were a little puzzled. They didn't know what was going on. They tried to find the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and the others. After looking around, they found that there were only the two of them on the barren mountain. They had no choice but to go down the mountain and go straight to the nearest town. However, when they arrived at the town, the two women were even more dumbfounded. They found that not only could they not find out anything, but even basic survival had become a problem. The common currency used in the immortal cultivation world was spirit crystals, but Li Xian'er only brought money from the secular world, so she couldn't use it to buy things. Li Xian'er once wanted to take the money to find a place to eat, but she was scolded by the owner of a restaurant, who threw her out along with the money. As a zombie, Nie Xiaoyu didn't need to eat or drink, nor did she need to sleep. She didn't have any material needs, so she was even worse off than Li Xian'er. She didn't have anything valuable on her except a weird umbrella. This umbrella could protect cultivators from being affected by the sunlight when they went out during the day. It was also the only thing Nie Xiaoyu had brought from the inner martial arts world to the cultivation world. Fortunately, there were many wild fruit trees on the barren mountain where they came from. During the first few days in the immortal cultivation world, Li Xian'er basically relied on fruits to fill her stomach. Occasionally she would get some game to improve her diet. Nie Xiaoyu didn't need to eat or drink to replenish her energy, so she just accompanied Li Xian'er silently and put some fruits on her body. As for the place to live, after the first night on the barren mountain, they finally found an abandoned warehouse. After observing for a while, they found that no one came, so they simply lived in it. They didn't expect to live in it for more than a month. During this period, they also wanted to find some suitable jobs, at least in exchange for some spirit crystals to buy food. Li Xian'er ate fruits every day for a month, so her face became thinner. Nie Xiaoyu's white dress had become gray, but she had no money to buy new clothes. She could only wash and dry the clothes every night and put them on the next day. Unfortunately, their strength was limited, and they looked like two delicate women. They couldn't find a suitable job in such a short time. There were some rich merchants or young masters who took a fancy to their beauty and wanted to marry them as concubines, but they were all rejected by the two of them. At this time, seeing the newly built Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce, Li Xian'er and Nie Xiaoyu walked into the Chamber of Commerce with the mentality of giving it a try. Anyway, even if they didn't succeed, there was nothing to lose. Seeing the two beautiful women walk into the shop, a young man in the Chamber of Commerce's uniform immediately greeted them. As soon as he walked in front of the two women, the man felt that one of the girls looked gloomy and inexplicably held an umbrella. However, he still plucked up his courage, put on a smile and asked, "Hello, ladies. May I ask what business you need?" "Business? You can speak English? You're quite up to date. But can you give a brief introduction first?" Li Xian'er felt surprised and amused. In the originally quaint town, suddenly meeting such a strange staff member of the Chamber of Commerce made her feel like she was in the secular world. "Oh, of course, no problem. But what's English?" The young man nodded with a smile and said, "Our Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce is almost omnipotent. There are only things that you can't think of, and there is no business that we can't do." "Isn't that a little too much?" Li Xian'er curled her lips and said with a little disbelief. "Don't worry, as long as you can pay enough spiritual crystals, you can rest assured that no matter what kind of business it is, you can rest assured that our Chamber of Commerce will handle it." The young man patted his chest and said, "For example, our Chamber of Commerce can help to find people, find a spouse, set up banquets, protect people, settle disputes, and so on. We can even provide a variety of jobs for people who come to seek employment. It can be said that we have all kinds of relevant business." "I see. Then can we see what kind of jobs we can do first?" Li Xian'er frowned slightly and asked helplessly. Originally, when Li Xian'er heard that the Chamber of Commerce would accept any kind of task, she wanted to entrust them to help to inquire about Xiao Chen and the others. However, when she heard that they had to pay, she immediately backed out and decided to ask about the job first. Of course, no problem. Ladies, please follow me. The young man smiled and nodded. Then, he made a gesture of invitation and led the way to the counter inside. Li Xianer and Ye Xiaoyu looked at each other. Although they were still a little uneasy, they obediently followed behind the young man. After walking to the side of the counter, Li Xianer and Ye Xiaoyu saw that the man greeted another middle-aged man behind the counter. Then he pointed at them and whispered a few words to them. Chapter 1467. Li Xianer was just about to walk closer to listen to what they were talking about when she saw the young man walking back with two forms with a smile. After handing the forms to Li Xianer and Ye Xiaoyu respectively, the young man said with a smile, "Take it. Fill in this registration form first. It's best to write as detailed as possible so that we can contact you at any time." Ye Xiaoyu held the umbrella in one hand and the form in the other. She lowered her head and looked at the contents of the form silently. "That's it? That's it?" Li Xianer pinched the corner of the form and looked at the young man suspiciously. "What do you mean? What else do you want to do?" The young man asked with a strange expression. Li Xianer asked warily, "You're not going to charge us a fee, are you? After we fill in the form, you're going to ask us to pay a middleman's fee, or give us a set of inferior clothes to pay a uniform deposit? How is that possible? Miss, don't joke around." The young man looked at Li Xianer speechlessly, shook his head and said, "Our de Cultivation Chamber of Commerce's reputation is well known in the cultivation world. We never charge any fees from workers. We're an official direct store, not a deceptive company. If you don't believe me, you can ask around." "You're so full of yourself," Li Xianer muttered to herself. She waved her hand and said, "Well, that's all. You can go." The young man quietly rolled his eyes and turned to leave. Suddenly he heard another cold voice, "Wait, you can't go yet." "What now?" The young man turned around angrily, thinking that these two girls weren't here to make trouble, were they? After turning around, the man discovered that it was another girl with a deathly pale complexion who was speaking this time. She was also staring at him with her empty eyes, appearing to be extremely cautious and flustered. Ye Xiaoyu waved the form in her hand and said coldly, "You haven't given us a pen to fill in the form." The young man couldn't help but shiver. Only then did he remember that he was talking to Li Xianer just now. As a result, he forgot about this matter. The pen was still in his hand. Taking out two pens and handing them to Li Xianer and Ye Xiaoyu, the young man quickly instructed, "After you're done filling out the form, just hand it to the uncle at the counter. He'll help you with the other procedures. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." After saying that, the young man did not wait for the two to answer. He turned around and walked quickly to the door to receive other guests. In his opinion, although these two girls were quite beautiful, they looked strange. It was better for him to stay away from them. Li Xianer and Ye Xiaoyu naturally didn't know what the young man was complaining about. They carefully read the registration form and then found a few strangers who didn't look like staff members to ask about the situation of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. After a round of asking, the two women actually received one-sided praise. Only then did they believe that this place was really not a scam. They registered their identity information, cultivation level, residential address, and so on the form one by one. Then they returned the form to the middle-aged man at the counter. A Chi refinement stage cultivator and a devil cultivator cultivator. This level is too low. The middle-aged man took the form and shook his head with a frown. Although he didn't know what cultivator was, he knew that devil cultivators weren't strong. Uncle, we really need a job. Can you help us find a suitable job?" Li Xianer leaned on the counter, put her palms together and begged sincerely. The middle-aged man thought for a while and waved his hand helplessly. "There really isn't a suitable job for you at the moment. Leave this information form. If there's a suitable job for you, our people will go to your door and contact you. How about it? Then? All right then. If there's a job, please choose us first." Although Li Xianer was a little unwilling, she could only nod gloomily. She left the Chamber of Commerce with Ye Xiaoyu and walked to the abandoned warehouse where she lived. After walking for a long time, Li Xianer couldn't see the door of the Chamber of Commerce anymore. Seeing that no one came out to ask them to pay any fees, Li Xianer secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this Chamber of Commerce wasn't a scam. Although the name sounded a little strange, as long as it was legal, it didn't matter. She only hoped that this strange Chamber of Commerce could really help them find a job. When the two women returned to the abandoned warehouse, it was already very late. Thinking of the words of the middle-aged man, Li Xianer felt a little annoyed. She simply sat on the ground and closed her eyes to cultivate. Li Xianer felt that if she could successfully break through to the foundation establishment stage, it might be easier for her to find a job. Now that she was stuck in the qi refinement stage, it was really too depressing. Sister Xianer, actually you're already very powerful. It's all because my strength is too low that I'm a burden to you. Now I can't even find a job. Sigh. Nie Xiaoyu sighed softly and said with a lonely face. In her opinion, the people of the Chamber of Commerce must have looked down on cultivators, so they deliberately didn't give them a job. If only Li Xianer was here, they might be able to find a suitable job. Xiaoyu, don't say silly things. How can you be blamed for this? Li Xianer opened her eyes and gently patted Nie Xiaoyu's hand. She said softly, actually, I thought that the qi refinement stage was very powerful, but after entering the world of cultivation, I found that there are high-level cultivators everywhere. Since the two of us are together, there's no need to differentiate between you and me. Sister Xianer, Nie Xiaoyu was very touched by Li Xianer's words. Just when she was about to say something, she suddenly heard a rumbling sound from Li Xianer's stomach. Li Xianer's pretty face blushed. Only then did she remember that she had only eaten an apple today, so now her stomach was disappointingly protesting. Are you hungry? I still have some fruits here. Nie Xiaoyu took out the fruits from her arms and placed them in front of Li Xianer. After thinking for a while, she said, Sister Xianer, I'd better go to the mountain again and get you some delicious game. You can't eat fruits every day. You have to ensure that you have a balanced nutrition. Although Nie Xiaoyu had the protection of the umbrella during the day, she still liked to move around at night. Now that it was already night, she gradually became more energetic. Chapter 1468. There's no need. I'll just make do with some fruits. Before Li Xianer could finish her sentence, Nie Xiaoyu had already flown out of the window with her movement technique. Seeing this, Li Xianer had no choice but to give up. She smiled helplessly, closed her eyes and continued to cultivate, waiting for Nie Xiaoyu to bring back some game. After cultivating for a short while, Li Xianer vaguely heard a noise coming from outside. She frowned slightly, opened her eyes and listened carefully. It seemed that someone was fighting not far away. There were whistling sounds of fists and kicks, and there were also women's shouts. The woman's voice sounded a little familiar. Why did it sound like Nie Xiaoyu's? Li Xianer was shocked. She immediately stood up and released her divine sense toward the source of the sound, preparing to investigate the situation. After a search, Li Xianer found that Nie Xiaoyu had been surrounded by several men in black in the forest not far from the abandoned warehouse. Nie Xiaoyu tried her best to break out of the encirclement, but the men in black did not let her break out of the encirclement. They did not attack her either. It seemed that they were just constantly exhausting her yin qi, and had no intention of hurting her. At this time Nie Xiaoyu looked a little panicked. Her pale face now looked even more terrifying, and her movements became a little slow. It seemed that she could not hold on any longer. Seeing this, Li Xianer could not be bothered to cultivate anymore. She immediately rushed out of the warehouse and rushed in that direction. After running a few steps before she reached the scene, Li Xianer saw from afar that Nie Xiaoyu had been subdued by one of the men in black. She saw that the man in black grabbed Nie Xiaoyu, then made a gesture to the others and directly fled to the west. The rest of the men in black also quickly followed. The group of people shuttled through the forest very skillfully and soon lost track of them. Li Xianer was very anxious. She tried her best to chase in the direction they left. After chasing for several kilometers, she still could not catch up with them. She could not even see their shadows. Slowly stopping, Li Xianer stomped her feet in annoyance. She was depressed and confused. Where did this group of people come from? Why did they want to capture Nie Xiaoyu? They did not have any feuds with others recently, right? Logically speaking, according to the level of the men in black, it would be a piece of cake for them to capture another person. However, they did not have any intention of turning back to capture her. What was going on? Li Xianer returned to the abandoned warehouse in puzzlement. She couldn't figure out the reason behind it no matter how hard she tried. She didn't dare to practice on her own anymore. She first blocked the broken warehouse door with something and sat in the corner. She spent the whole night vigilantly observing her surroundings, afraid that the men in black would return and take her away. Li Xianer spent the night in fear, but nothing happened. Early the next morning she ran to the small town with two swollen panda eyes. She wanted to see if there was a police station in the secular world or a government office where she could find people. Li Xianer to find people several times in the town. She did to with for her. She to with for with. She and for. And for with for. Li for she. She to Li, for with to for. And. Yesterday, Li Xianer learned from the staff of the Chamber of Commerce that she could spend money to find people. She did not expect that in just one day, there would be one more person she needed to find. Li Xianer, who was penniless, stood on the street and looked around helplessly. She sighed heavily and went back to her residence unhappily. She ate some of the fruits she had left last night to fill her stomach. Then she sat on the ground in a daze thinking about what to do next. Knock knock knock. While Li Xianer was frowning and worrying, a knocking sound came from outside the door. Before Li Xianer could respond, the sound came again. Excuse me, Li Xianer, are you there? I am an employee of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. We have a suitable job recently, and I want to ask if you want to take it. Hearing that it was an employee of the Chamber of Commerce, Li Xianer, who was nervous, was relieved. Just now, she thought it was those men in black who had come back to catch her. Opening the door, Li Xianer saw a man in the uniform of the Chamber of Commerce standing in front of the abandoned warehouse. He was looking around in surprise as if he thought he was in the wrong place. Why are you here? Li Xianer took a closer look and found that the person was the young man who received her at the entrance of the Chamber of Commerce yesterday. I am responsible for running errands and entertaining people in the Chamber of Commerce, so contacting the employees is also my job. Seeing that Li Xianer really walked out of the dilapidated warehouse, the young man's spirit was lifted. He immediately took out the contract, handed it to her and said with a smile, "Look at the contents of the contract. If there is no problem, sign now and you can start working immediately." Li Xianer took the contract and read it carefully. She felt that it was reasonable. Just as she was about to agree, she hesitated and asked, "There is no problem with the contract, but my companion who was with me yesterday was taken away at night, so now I am the only one who can go to work. But I want to ask, can you help me find her?" "No problem. Finding people is also one of the businesses of our Chamber of Commerce." The young man nodded and answered fluently, "There are several levels of searching for people. If you send ordinary experts to search, each person needs to pay 10 spirit crystals a day. If you ask for more powerful experts, then the search speed and range will be expanded, and the cost of spirit crystals will increase exponentially." "An employee is missing and it also needs money to find her?" Li Xianer muttered to herself. After thinking for a while, she waved her hand and sighed softly, "Forget it. If I had so many spirit crystals, would I have to go to work for your Chamber of Commerce? Let's talk about finding people later, I'd better go to work first." When Li Xianer asked this question, she actually still had a glimmer of hope that Nie Xiaoyu had registered with the Chamber of Commerce, so the Chamber of Commerce could help find her whereabouts. She didn't expect that she would still need to pay spirit crystals like usual to find people, so she had no choice but to give up the idea. "Then come with me to the Chamber of Commerce now. You can go to work directly after completing the procedures." The young man didn't care about Li Xianer's previous mutterings. He shrugged and led her to the Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 1469. Li Xianer followed behind the young man in a daze. Originally, she only needed to find out the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and the others. Unexpectedly, when it rains, it pours. Now even Nie Xiaoyu was captured. At this point, she could only choose to live under someone else's roof for the time being and work hard for a while. After earning enough spirit crystals, she would think of a way to find Nie Xiaoyu. At a place hundreds of miles west of Floating Spirit Town, the young master led a group of people and finally arrived at another branch with Cheng Menjing in custody. After putting down the luggage, the young master had just finished packing his things and returned to his residence. Before he had time to take a sip of tea, Elder Shin came to find him. "Young master, I was sorting out the information we received during the transfer and found a rather important situation, so I wanted to report it to you as soon as possible," Elder Shin said respectfully. Elder Shin had been traveling day and night with the young master for a few days. He originally wanted to sit down and rest for a while and look through the regular information, but he was immediately shocked by a piece of important news. Before he could even sit down, he ran over again. "What's the situation? Why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that Xiao Chen has caught up with us again?" The young master rolled his eyes at him impatiently and poured himself a cup of tea. That's not it. Elder Shin scratched his head awkwardly and explained, a subordinate here reported that a while ago, the second master sent people to capture a little girl who is a ghost cultivator. She is still locked up in a cell and hasn't had time to be tested. So, I wanted to ask for your opinion and see if you can arrange for a test. If it's suitable, let her go to that place to have a try? You're talking about the living dead? The young master wasn't surprised at all. He said indifferently, I just happened to meet the second master on my way back to my room. He's sending someone to pick her up and prepare to bring her to the laboratory for a comprehensive test. You don't have to worry about this. Okay, then I won't disturb you anymore. Young master, please have a good rest. Elder Shin wanted to take credit, but he didn't expect that the young master already knew about this. He could only smile awkwardly and was about to leave. Wait. The young master suddenly thought of something and asked Elder Shin, have you settled down Qing Menjing? Remember to never untie the rope on her. Don't worry, young master. I know what to do. Elder Shin immediately put on a naughty smile and said proudly, I've already asked my men to lock Qing Menjing and that Yin girl together. Anyway, netherworld cultivators are all zombies and they have always looked like ghosts. Before they are taken away, I can scare that little girl Qing Menjing a little. At the same time, I can also take her spirit down a notch so that she can be more tactful in the future. Looking at Elder Shin's proud and elated expression after his evil scheme succeeded, the young master reckoned that he must have suffered quite a bit from that little girl, which was why he came up with such a wicked idea. It would be good if he could teach her a lesson. That's a good idea. Let's do that. Everyone has been busy moving for the past few days, so they must be a little tired. You should rest early too. The young master nodded and waved his hand casually, sending Elder Shin away. After Elder Shin left, the young master wanted to go back to his room to sleep. However, he remembered that he hadn't seen his father since he came back, so he could only sigh helplessly. He changed his clothes and went out again, heading towards the largest room in the courtyard. At the other end of the courtyard, Qing Menjing was being led forward by a rope by a guard unwillingly. They were led to a simple room. At this moment, Qing Menjing's heart was filled with anger. After a few days of tiring traveling, her clothes were almost completely covered in dust, and there were a few dead leaves stuck to her hair. Her entire body was soaked in sweat, feeling sticky and extremely uncomfortable. Right now, what Qing Menjing hoped for the most was a place where she could take a good bath. In the end, after arriving at this courtyard, she was brought here and there with a few guards changing. She even walked to such a strange place, so she was in a terrible mood. Fortunately, although the guards were not very polite to her, they didn't do anything out of line, so Qing Menjing could still control herself. However, with her current dirty clothes and messy hair, no one would be interested in her. Go in, there's something good waiting for you inside. Outside the room, the guard opened the door and pushed Qing Menjing from the back to the front. After pushing her through the door, he slammed the door shut and called his other companions to take turns to guard her. Shameless thief, you're courting death. If you have the ability, untie the ropes on me. If I don't beat you to death, my surname isn't Chen. Qing Menjing staggered from the push and almost fell. She turned her head and wanted to roll her eyes at the guard, but she found that the door had been closed. She angrily shouted at the door. Oh, who's here? When Qing Menjing was throwing a tantrum at the door, a faint female voice suddenly came from the corner of the room. Qing Menjing was shocked. She didn't expect that there would be someone else in this room. She immediately turned her head back and felt that the entire room seemed to be filled with a cold air. It was as if there was a white ball hiding in the dark corner, and the voice came from there. She couldn't help but shiver. Qing Menjing gathered her courage and took a deep breath. She walked a few steps in that direction and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the white ball seemed to be a woman. Moreover, it was a woman with disheveled hair. After a few more glances, Qing Menjing realized that the woman's face was completely covered by her hair. She couldn't see her face at all. After hesitating for a long time, she still gathered her courage and asked carefully, Hey you, who are you? Are you a human or a ghost? Why do you look so gloomy? This voice seems a little familiar. The woman in white suddenly muttered softly. She then slowly raised her head and stared at the young girl standing in front of her. After staring for a while, the woman in white realized that although the young girl's face was covered in dust, the outline of her facial features was very similar to someone she knew. She tentatively asked in a low voice, Are you Miss Qing Menjing? Qing Menjing was slightly startled and said with some confusion, I am. Who are you? How do you know me? I'm Ye Xiaoyu. Do you still remember me? The woman in white forced a smile and introduced herself softly. Chapter 1470. Ye Xiaoyu? Qing Minjing frowned and thought for a moment. Then she suddenly realized something and said, "Oh, I remember. You're that Cultivator." Seeing Ye Xiaoyu nod, Qing Minjing immediately became excited and said, "That's great. You're the first person I've seen apart from Shishan Giant Bull since I came to the cultivation world. Are you alone? Have you seen anyone else? Do you know where Xiaoqin is? Why are you here? Were you also caught by them?" Qing Minjing couldn't wait to ask a series of questions. However, before Ye Xiaoyu could answer the first question, she shook her head and said, "Forget it. We'll talk about these questions later. Help me untie the rope first. I'm going to beat the guard at the door. That guy is so annoying. He pushed me just now and I almost fell." Ye Xiaoyu didn't get up to help Qing Minjing untie the rope. Instead, she smiled helplessly and said, "Well, Miss Qing, it's not that I don't want to help you, but we're in the same boat now." "What do you mean?" Qing Minjing was stunned and walked over subconsciously. When she walked up to Ye Xiaoyu and took a closer look, she found that Ye Xiaoyu had also been tied up by the rope with the same strange symbol. She was immediately dumbfounded. Ye Xiaoyu sighed bitterly and said faintly, "And, even if our hands aren't tied up, there's no way to untie this kind of rope, because this rope is actually a kind of magic artifact. It can't be untied by brute force alone. Someone has tried to untie it for me before, but no one succeeded." "What? Someone helped you untie it?" Qing Minjing was stunned when she heard this. She quickly asked, "Was it someone else from the inner martial arts world? Were they also locked up? Who was there? Did you see Xiaoqin?" "No, those people are the immortal cultivators who were locked here before. They are not from the inner martial arts world." Ye Xiaoyu shook her head and explained simply, "They are all tied up by this kind of celestial device. After I came here, I tried with them for a long time and used all kinds of methods I could think of, but I couldn't untie the ropes." "I see." Qing Minjing looked a little disappointed. She then asked, "What about these people you mentioned? I see that you're the only one in this room." Ye Xiaoyu's expression suddenly dimmed. She replied in a low voice, "They were taken away by the bad guys outside yesterday and never came back." "That? Ye Xiaoyu, I don't know if it's convenient to ask, how did you get caught?" Qing Minjing saw that Ye Xiaoyu was a little depressed, so she changed the topic and asked. Qing Minjing's excitement from seeing her colleagues had long since disappeared. She also felt sad when she saw Ye Xiaoyu's miserable appearance. Helplessness and depression intertwined in her heart. Ye Xiaoyu's strength was not enough, and her vitality was restricted by the rope. It seemed that she could only hope that Xiaoqin could find this place again so that he could escape with her and Ye Xiaoyu. He didn't know if that guy would be able to track him down in a short period of time and successfully rescue him from the place he had been searching for. "I came in with Sister Lysianer and landed on a barren mountain. Originally we wanted to find others, but..." Ye Xiaoyu didn't know the complicated emotions in Qing Minjing's heart at this time. She briefly recounted her experience with Lysianer in the small town and how she was caught by the men in black. "It seems a little strange." Qing Minjing withdrew her thoughts. After listening to Ye Xiaoyu's narration, she frowned and stood up. She paced back and forth in the room and muttered to herself, "Why did they only catch you but not Lysianer? Even if they want to rely on us to threaten Xiaoqin, wouldn't they have one more bargaining chip if they could catch one more person?" "I'm not sure about this." Ye Xiaoyu blinked and tried to guess. "Maybe it was because I was outside at that time, and they didn't see Sister Sienna in the warehouse so they didn't catch her?" "That's unlikely. Didn't you say that Lysianer chased after you later? It's just that you couldn't beat her, so you were caught before she arrived." Qing Minjing shook her head and denied Ye Xiaoyu's guess. If they wanted to catch Lysianer, they should have turned back and caught her. "I don't know." Ye Xiaoyu was also confused. Ever since she was caught inexplicably and locked in this room, no one had come to find her. She asked those cultivators, but they didn't know what was going on. So, at this time she couldn't figure out what those people saw in her. Strange. It's too strange. No matter how hard Qing Minjing thought about it, she felt that something was not quite right, but she couldn't figure out the specific reason for a while. She only felt that the other party's actions didn't seem to be logical, but she couldn't find a direction to break through. "Miss Qing, then why are you here?" Seeing that Qing Minjing couldn't think of anything for a long time, Ye Xiaoyu changed the topic and asked, "Were you also caught by the men in black?" "Don't call me young miss. Sounds weird. Just call me Menjing. Cheng Menjing was just about to say a few polite words when she suddenly heard the door being pushed open. 2 guards rushed in from the outside. Before the 2 women could react, the 2 guards quickly walked to Nie Xiaoyu's side, pulled the rope on her body, and dragged her away without saying a word. Nie Xiaoyu was completely scared. Her little face was as white as a snowflake. She couldn't help but follow the 2 guards and stumble out of the room. Cheng Menjing was also shocked. When she came back to her senses, the door had been closed, and Nie Xiaoyu's desperate eyes were isolated outside the room. Hey! You stinking bastards, why did you take her away? Hurry up and send her back to me. Cheng Menjing was so angry that she stomped her feet. She shouted at the door, we haven't finished talking yet. Why don't you know the rules at all? Don't you know that interrupting other people's conversation is a very rude behavior? However, no matter how Cheng Menjing scolded, the closed door never opened again. Moreover, the soundproofing of this room seemed to be quite good. She originally wanted to stick to the wall to listen to the movements outside, but she found that she couldn't hear anything at all. After trying several times, it didn't work. In the end, Cheng Menjing could only sit on the ground angrily and stare at the door with her bright eyes. She planned to interrogate the fierce guards the next time they came in. Chapter 1471. In this vast house, the commotion caused by Cheng Menjing was like a pebble thrown into the sea. It only caused a slight ripple and quickly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, in the center of the residence, in the most grandiose room, the young master was sitting opposite an old man with a frown on his face. There were 2 cups of steaming hot tea on the table, and the 2 of them seemed to be discussing something. The old man looked rather old. Not only was his sideburns white, but there were also many silver strands in his hair. However, his body was very straight and his eyes were emitting waves of light. From time to time, there would be a soul-stirring look in his eyes. The hand that was holding the teacup was still steady and strong, and it did not tremble at all. If I remember correctly, you should have been staying in the headquarters in Yaoxian Prefecture. Why did you suddenly come here? The old man put down the teacup in his hand, raised his head, and stared sharply into the young master's eyes as he asked expressionlessly. This old man was the young master's father, who was also the great master of the entire bandit group. The mountain bandits that were wreaking havoc in Luxian Prefecture and the arrogant horse bandits in Baxian Prefecture were all subordinates of this group. Their power was almost everywhere in the entire immortal cultivation world. As he rarely showed his face, the great master had always been a very mysterious figure. Apart from a few important figures, no one else knew what he looked like. They only knew that he was an existence that people looked up to. Father, I was forced to come here to seek refuge. I was really forced to do so. I have nowhere to go. The young master seemed to be a little afraid of the great master. He lowered his head and answered gloomily. Usually in the headquarters, it was the young master who dealt with matters. The big master rarely gave any instructions. Now that he had lost the headquarters and left in defeat, the young master was actually very nervous in his heart. He was afraid that his father would reprimand him in anger. However, if he did not report it, his father would definitely be even angrier. So, after thinking about it, the young master chose to come over and tell the truth. Perhaps he could gain some sympathy. What happened? The great master's expression became even more unhappy. He knocked on the table and asked, "Such a big headquarters was left for you. Why do you have nowhere to go?" "It's all because of those troublemakers." The young master waved his fist fiercely and gritted his teeth as he said, "If that little brat Xiao Chen hadn't destroyed the mountain bandits' hideout in Luxian County and the headquarters in Yaoxian County, and the horse bandits' power had been destroyed by that little girl, Cheng Menjing, I wouldn't have fled back here in such a hurry." "What? Even that Nangong guy failed." "Looks like this brat Xiao Chen really has some skills." The great leader was slightly stunned and looked a little surprised. "That's right. Fortunately, I placed my eyes outside in advance so he didn't catch me red-handed." The young master's expression was a little distorted as he said fiercely, "Fortunately, I caught that little girl, Cheng Menjing. When I have some free time later, I will definitely torture her and take revenge on her." The great leader was slightly surprised, but his expression quickly turned cold. When he heard the young master's words, he reprimanded him in a deep voice, "Don't think about such nonsense. We have too many things to do. How can we have so much time to play around with a little girl?" "Yes, I know my mistake. Please forgive me, father." The young master quivered and immediately lowered his head to admit his mistake. His back was drenched in cold sweat. The great leader nodded slightly and didn't reprimand him anymore. Instead, he asked indifferently, "Have you dealt with the horse bandits' headquarters? Although this is only a large branch, you should know that all the important research is carried out in this place. If Xiao Chun finds traces of this place, the consequences will be unimaginable. You can rest assured about this. I have already asked people to destroy all the relevant information. All the subordinates have also been transferred here with me this time. No matter what, Xiao Chun will not be able to find the location of this branch." The young master immediately nodded and guaranteed confidently, "That's good. Don't worry about it too much. I have other things for you later." The great leader's expression softened slightly as he instructed indifferently, "Thank you for your understanding, Father. I will remember your teachings." The young master bowed respectfully. He hesitated for a moment and asked again, "That? Father, may I ask if we should send more masters to get rid of Xiao Chun?" "Xiao Chun, this brat." The great leader's vigorous and powerful fingers knocked on the table a few times. He murmured with a somewhat dignified expression, "As far as I know, Elder Nangong is already at the peak of the mysterious ascension stage. I didn't expect that even he. Yes. I don't know what kind of luck Xiao Chun has. His cultivation actually improved so fast." The young master continued the conversation and sighed sincerely, "I guess we can only send mountain opening stage masters over this time. By the way, we should also clean up the Burning Sky faction. Those bandits took away all the storage in our mountain bandits' hiding place. We can take them back to make up for our recent losses." From the young master's point of view, now that the horse bandits and mountain bandits could no longer be dispatched, their income would definitely decrease a lot. Therefore, they had to take back all the resources from before. He had completely forgotten that those spirit crystals and heavenly treasures were also snatched from others. However, to the young master's surprise, the great leader did not immediately agree to his suggestion. Instead, he rubbed his temples and pondered for a while. Then he slowly shook his head and said, "What you said? I'm afraid it won't work for the time being." The young master was stunned. Before he could ask, the great leader explained, "It's not that easy to invite mountain opening stage masters. There are only a few of them in the entire immortal cultivation world. If we want to invite them, we will definitely have to pay a huge price. Moreover, our main focus is on collecting spirit crystals now. It's impossible to spend a lot of effort to deal with Xiao Chen's group. But if we keep Xiao Chen alive, it will definitely be a big problem. He is already in mountain opening stage master now. If we don't get rid of him as soon as possible, I reckon there will be endless troubles in the future." The young master said with a face full of worry. The young master's heart was filled with hatred towards Xiao Chen. He couldn't wait to get rid of this fellow immediately. Even in his dreams he wished that he could kill him. However, he had no way to deal with it now. Although the young master's organization was very large in scale and usually had sufficient connections and resources, what the organization lacked the most was a powerful immortal cultivator expert. Chapter 1472. Usually, if there was anything that required the help of high-level cultivators, their organization could only rely on their accumulated relationships and ask the experts of various sects to help them. They even had to pay a huge amount of spiritual crystals. Therefore, if they encountered a person like Xiao Chen who was not weak and was a thorn in their side, they would also have a headache. If they could, they would recruit those who could and try their best to avoid conflict. Get rid of him, we definitely have to get rid of him. I also want to get rid of him, but not now. The great master could naturally understand the resentment in the young master's heart, but he still warned him sternly. Seeing that the young master still could not accept it, the great master sighed and added, "You don't have to be too anxious. As long as we get that material and accomplish that big thing, we will have a very powerful voice in the immortal cultivation world. When that time comes, it won't be us asking the experts of other sects to come out and help us. Instead, it will be the sects who will rush to please us and beg us to do things for them." "Father, I think you better reconsider." The young master wanted to continue arguing, but before he could finish his sentence, the door to the room was suddenly pushed open. Both of them turned to look, only to see an old man in his 60s with a face as red as dates and eyes as large as copper bells walking in. He bowed to the first master and reporting to the first master, "I've found a suitable cultivator candidate. I've just checked her thoroughly and there's nothing wrong with her indicators. She's just right to go to that place to carry out the mission." Very good. It was the right decision to leave this matter to you. There are results so quickly. The great master's expression softened a little when he heard this, and he nodded in satisfaction. This old man in his 60s was the second master of this organization. He was usually in charge of trivial chores and daily communication with various sections. Occasionally he would also help the great master with some important tasks. Thank you for your praise, great master, that. The second master first accepted the praise with a smile, then his expression changed and he stammered a little awkwardly. What's wrong? Did you encounter some problems? The great leader glanced at the second leader, waved his hand and said, if you have any questions, feel free to speak. Right now, the most important thing for our organization is to focus on obtaining that material. Everything else can be put aside for now. It's like this. Although this Cultivator meets the requirements in all aspects, her cultivation level is very low. She hasn't even started cultivating. She hasn't even entered the chi refinement stage yet. If we just go there rashly. The second leader shook his head. He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was already very clear. The great master pondered for a while, then said with a frown, theoretically speaking, the poisonous gas in that place should be ineffective against cultivators. Wasn't that the reason we were looking for cultivators back then? That's not what I meant. The second in charge hurriedly explained, the poisonous gas may be ineffective against her, but with her insignificant strength, what if there are other dangers inside? Moreover, if you were to encounter other competitors, you might be beaten to the ground in a single move. Other competitors? Sure enough, there are still others who want that material. The great leader raised his eyebrows, stared at the second leader and asked, have you found out who the other party is? Hearing that someone else was also going to take action, the great leader's expression was not surprised at all. After all, everyone would covet a good treasure. If the material wasn't hidden in an extremely dangerous and unpredictable place, perhaps all the major sects would have been fighting for it. According to reliable information from my subordinates, the Huanshan Pavilion has also found a suitable candidate recently. However, I don't know why they haven't taken action to capture that person. I don't know what they are waiting for. The second in charge touched his nose and said firmly, so I think we must take advantage of this opportunity to get there first, lest they get the first prize. The Huanshan Pavilion? The great leader repeated with a somewhat solemn expression. His fingers lightly tapped on the table as if he was thinking about something. The second in charge waited for a while. Seeing that the great leader didn't move, his expression suddenly changed and he put on a gloomy face. He said in a gloomy tone, how about, we secretly send someone to the Huanshan Pavilion to find out who the person they are targeting is, and then follow the clues to kill the suitable candidate first? Nonsense. Are you born in the year of the dog? How can you change your mind so easily? The great leader immediately glared at the second leader and berated him mercilessly. The Huanshan Pavilion is the #1 sect in the immortal cultivation world. Their strength and foundation are extremely deep. How can the current shake them? If the other party counterattacks with full force, we won't get any advantage either. Maybe both sides will have to fight to the death. At that time, won't we be a joke to other sects for nothing? Great leader, please don't be angry. I was just saying it casually. Just treat it as a gust of wind blowing past your ear and listen to it. If you feel that what I said is wrong, please don't take it to heart. After being scolded, the second in charge immediately put away his gloomy expression and put on an embarrassed smile as he spoke awkwardly. When the young master saw this scene, he couldn't help but feel angry and amused. He thought to himself that the second in charge was indeed a dog-faced person. He changed his expression faster than flipping a book. It was a waste for him to grow so old and be so shameless. It would be a pity if he didn't become an actor. The first leader was a little speechless as he unhappily glanced at the second leader. After pondering for a while, he finally opened his mouth and said, how about this? Make a trip to the medicine room later and take out all of our precious pills that can raise one's cultivation level. Properly raise that cultivator's strength. Take out all of them for her to use? The second in charge was stunned. He suspected that there was something wrong with his ears and confirmed again. Yes, as long as it's a high-grade pill that can raise cultivation, give it to her. Remember, you must raise her cultivation level as soon as possible, no matter the cost. Let her have enough strength to go to that place and let her live safely in there. The boss nodded his head and instructed in an extremely serious manner. It was clear that this matter was extremely important to him. Okay, then I will do it immediately. Wait for my good news. The second in charge cupped his hands and accepted the order. He excused himself to the young master and immediately turned to leave. On the left side of the house, in a large messy room, Nie Xiaoyu was sitting on a chair anxiously. The chair was cushioned comfortably, but Nie Xiaoyu wasn't in the mood to enjoy it at all. At this moment, her mind was blank. She didn't know what kind of fate she would face. Chapter 1473. Nie Xiaoyu couldn't figure out why these people suddenly kidnapped her. She had been tied up here for a few days and nights. Other than doing some inexplicable tests on her and asking some strange questions, they didn't talk to her anymore. Even if she tried to ask questions, no one answered her. Now all the guards had left the room and she was the only one left in the room, or rather she was the only dead person left. Just when Nie Xiaoyu was at a loss of what to do, the door suddenly opened, and second master walked into the room quickly. He quickly moved a chair from the side and sat in front of Nie Xiaoyu. After looking at her for a while, he said, "Your name is Nie Xiaoyu, right? Just now, through our inspection, we confirmed that you are a genuine cultivator. Although I have indeed heard of the existence of people like you, I don't know if you are still considered a human, but it is still quite rare in the immortal cultivation world. I am indeed a nether cultivator, but I have never harmed anyone. Why did you capture me?" Nie Xiaoyu was a little flustered. She bit her lower lip and asked cautiously, "Harm anyone? That's not the point. It doesn't matter even if you are a great bandit or a homicidal maniac. We captured you this time because you are of some use." Second master shook his legs and said lightly, Use? Nie Xiaoyu blinked her eyes in confusion and said uncertainly, "No one has ever said that I have value. Are you mistaken? I'm not a master. I said you have value, so you have value." Second master waved his hand impatiently, stared at Nie Xiaoyu and said straightforwardly, "You just said that you are not a master, but I can help you become one. In exchange, you have to promise us one thing. What do you think? Help me become a master?" Nie Xiaoyu was even more confused. She asked with a puzzled face, Didn't you just say that you have never seen a nether cultivator? How do you know how to improve the strength of a nether cultivator?" No, it's not to improve the strength of a nether cultivator. Second master raised a finger, shook it and said slowly, "I can help you improve your internal strength to a higher level, so that you can look down upon many people in the cultivation world. Correspondingly, after the improvement you have to do something for us." Internal strength? What was that? I've never heard of it before. Nie Xiaoyu's mind was filled with question marks. She was completely confused by the term that the red-faced old man had mentioned. What? You haven't even heard of internal strength? Internal strength was the division of cultivation in the cultivation world. They are divided into chi refining, foundation establishment, gold core and so on. The second in charge rolled his eyes at Nie Xiaoyu and snapped, "How do you usually cultivate?" How could he not even know such a simple thing? Did he just come out from the deep mountains? What a waste. Nie Xiaoyu secretly curled her lips. She came from the secular world and didn't know much about the world of cultivators. Besides, she had been cultivating with old ghost Shishan all this time and basically didn't have access to high-level things. It was normal that she hadn't heard of them. Then, if I agree, what conditions do I have to agree to? Nie Xiaoyu collected her thoughts, looked at the second in charge and asked coldly, "What are you going to do?" I'm just a zombie. To be precise, I'm a dead person, so it's impossible for me to do those things. Although Nie Xiaoyu's voice was always as cold as a pearl, there was a slight fluctuation in her tone at this time. Fortunately, she was already a zombie without any vital signs, so there was no blood flow in her body, and her face was always as pale as a piece of paper. Otherwise, the second in charge would see that Nie Xiaoyu's face was actually as red as a lantern. Because of what had happened during this period, Nie Xiaoyu subconsciously thought that she was going to be offered to a powerful man as a concubine, or sell her body in exchange for some benefits. What are those things? What do you mean? The second in charge was slightly stunned and didn't quite understand what Nie Xiaoyu was implying. No, nothing, I just want to know whether what I'm going to do will be dangerous. Nie Xiaoyu found that she seemed to have misunderstood the second in charge, so she shook her head quickly and asked in a different way. The second in charge didn't take it seriously. He nodded and said in a deep voice, "Of course there will be danger, but as long as you can successfully improve your internal strength to the nascent soul stage, and then carry out this task according to the way I told you, you should be able to keep your life and escape unscathed. If you can agree to this condition, I can even consider making an exception to let you join our Heaven and Earth Association. Heaven and Earth Association? Is that the name of your place? Nie Xiaoyu repeated it in puzzlement. Wasn't this Heaven and Earth Association the name of a sect in a novel in the secular world? Why did it appear in such a place? There was also that nascent soul stage. It sounded very powerful. Would he be able to break through to that stage? However, Nie Xiaoyu was still a little speechless at the second in charge's words. She was already a dead person, so why did he say, keep my life and escape unscathed? It seemed that this guy in front of her didn't know what cultivation was at all. That's right. The second in charge didn't know what Nie Xiaoyu was complaining about. Instead, he straightened his back proudly and said proudly, our Heaven and Earth Association is very powerful. We have branches everywhere in the world of cultivation, and we have powerful resources. If you choose to join our Heaven and Earth Association, you won't regret your decision today. Haven't you heard of this saying? If you don't know the Heaven and Earth Association, it will be in vain even if you become a mountain splitter. I see. Nie Xiaoyu hesitated for a while, then gritted her teeth and nodded in agreement. I agree. Nie Xiaoyu's thinking was very simple. She felt that since she and Li Xianer came to the world of cultivation, they had run into a wall many times. Because the people here only cared about cultivators and didn't care about demonic cultivators, and because their strength was very low, they were always bullied and didn't dare to fight back. Now that she had this opportunity to improve her strength, she might be able to win more respect from others in the future. Nie Xiaoyu had even planned to start looking for Li Xianer, Xiao Chen, and the others after her cultivation level increased. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.